I would like to bring our meeting to order and welcome everyone back from summer vacation. At least I'm a little rusty up here, so had a great summer vacation and want to certainly welcome back our approximately 12,600 students, which is a number still in movement, as you know, at the beginning of the year, as well as our parents and staff members. This past week has been a active back-to-school week with back-to-school coffees and ribbon cuttings and lots of reuniting moments with students and teachers and parents. So want to welcome you back and let us, we had one item in closed session to report out. The board voted 5-0 to place a classified employee on the 39-month reemployment list. And with that, I would entertain a motion to, approve the agenda order.
So moved.
Second.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. So with that, we will go quickly to welcoming Dr. McGee, who now joins us on this side of the dais, and we're delighted to have him here. He also will be introducing our new student board reps from Pally and Gunn. So let me turn it over to Dr. McGee.
Great. Thank you so much. And what a thrill to be here live and in person and not watching this 3 time zones away. So, but it has been an exciting start to the new year. And gosh, I feel like I'm starting all over. You know, when back teaching middle school and raring to go. Kind of that mix of eager anticipation and I think some healthy trepidation as well. So, but with that, I wanted to really thank the board for your support, your hard work, and also for being out and about. That's quite a tradition, that first day of school, that those who can spend so much time in the schools, and I know the faculty and staff really appreciate seeing you there. And I know, Dana, you were at an event again last night. I know many of you go to the back-to-school nights, and this is it's pretty special. This doesn't happen in every school district, so look forward to a very long and productive relationship working with this team up here. And that includes our student reps. I'm going to hold off on the introductions to them until just before the report, but we oftentimes people say, God, what are the most important people in education today really thinking about? And they immediately may go to Arnie Duncan or the state superintendent. But the most important people in education today are seated at my left, and there's a few out in the audience, and that's our young men and young women of Palo Alto Unified School District. And as we go through our agenda tonight, I hope we keep that first and foremost in our mind, that all of us are here for our students, for the boys and girls in elementary school, the young men and young women in the middle school, and the men and women, I think, in the high school. So with that said, what I'd like to do is, since pictures say 1,000 words, I thought I would cut my part short and ask Tabitha to show a few pictures, a few slides from our opening days, and then after that, I'd like to share just a few thoughts about some of the themes that we have shared along the way with our various meetings and sessions and community learning. So our welcome back, go ahead, you can click through, Tabitha. Duveneck ribbon cutting for the new edition, you'll see that in a moment.
Cute. And
our first day of high school, I wasn't quite prepared for the camouflage and the underworld, but it was pretty special events. First day of middle school. And then our elementary schools. Past Ice Cream Social was this Saturday at Walter Hayes, and those 3 middle schoolers got up and spoke to the audience of adults and students. I know Melissa was over there, and it was quite an informative afternoon. And so we had permission to use the pictures of these 3 young men. And more of the elementary schools. We're having the Maker Studio dedication, I think, coming up September 6th. And capturing some of these great traditions at these first days of school. And our ribbon cutting, and this was our, I guess, unofficial opening, and we have an official ribbon cutting in October, but this was quite an event, and Barb, really we appreciated your remarks, again the board presence, the students cut the ribbon, and Esther and Paul and others were recognized. It was so much fun to see Pali alumni there, though, going way back, and it was quite a community event, and we look forward to the October one as well. So thanks, Tabitha. If we could bring up the next ones. Barb asked me to share just a little bit about what we did to launch the school year this year. And so let's pull up that collective community of learners slide if we could. And so one of the main themes this year is that we are a collective community and not a collection of communities. And, you know, we're first and foremost a district with 17 school sites, early childhood center, adult education center, and we're learners. And so these were some of the references and resources we used for these opening days. The board members all read that book, The Smartest Kids in the World. Amanda Ripley, the author, will be speaking at the California School Boards Association conference in December. The administrators, if they haven't read the whole book, they certainly read a few chapters in the appendix as well. Let's continue. So here were really the four big themes. I talked about the first one, and we'll have an illustration of that in a moment. We talked a little about beyond college and career readiness. America education policy now seems focused on college and career readiness as if it's our goal solely to prepare students to get into college and for a participation in a career. And I think if we're really doing a good job of preparing our students, we're preparing them for careers that probably don't exist yet. And when we look back or when we look ahead 20 years from now, the world will be an entirely different place as it was 20 years ago. So we want to make sure that our students above and beyond all are learners, active learners, lifelong learners, dynamic learners, critical thinkers, creative problem solvers. And I'm going to focus on that as we talk about our district vision in just a moment. The third big theme was about access and opportunity for all students, realizing that equitable access and opportunity does not necessarily mean equal access and opportunity. Students that need and deserve more should get more opportunity, more access, and we need to make sure of that. And so we talked about the importance of taking care of every one of our 13,000 students. And finally, some lessons from our reading about rigor and persistence. You'll hear more about that as we go along. Engaging instruction, we have a slide on that. A school culture of high expectations for intellectual achievement. That schools are a serious place. The boys and girls, young men and women, the men and women are there to learn. And then finally, that school leadership matters a great deal. So there's some commonalities in those 5 readings. Please. Oh, how did that get in there? We started with a collective community, and I wanted to thank those who put together the amazing race for our leadership team. I know Melissa and others worked on that, and we had 3 teams. And James, we did all right, didn't we? And Constance back there, yes, we did. Yeah, actually. So that was a winning team. But let's continue. Because that event was special in that it did bring all of us together as a collective community of leaders. What we're looking at now is our vision statement. Not everybody in the district recognizes this yet. They will very soon. And the members of the board, some members of the leadership team, spent a long time working on this, and this is very closely tied to our strategic plan. You'll see it echoed in the goals later in the meeting. But and we talk about what we want to do in preparing students beyond college and career readiness. So we want to talk about developing their knowledge, critical thinking and problem solving, deepening their knowledge, nurturing their curiosity, creativity, and resilience, empowering every child to reach his or her fullest intellectual, social, and creative potential. Let's see, this may not look like all 5s on the APs or all 800s on the SATs. Let's see what it does look like. Let's go through the clauses here, save some time. So this is what success looks like. These are high school students whose curiosity is being nurtured, and you see that same look of wonder on excitement on their faces that you see in our kindergarten students. And to me, This, I think, is what we hope and dream for all of our students. Retain this, and because you can see that these kids are motivated to do so much more than get a high test score or a good grade. That this is a slide about learning. Let's continue. We talk about, as we prepare students for college and career readiness, that we're going to have a goal later on that talks about global collaboration and global competition. And here's an example of students from a student from the U.S. working with students in China on a wind turbine project. One of the readings we had was called High Noon, 20 Global Problems and 20 Years to Solve Them. These are a list of some of the 20 global problems. These global problems are not going to be solved by the scientists in their laboratories. They're going to be solved by these women next to me. They're going to be solved by the students in our kindergarten and first grade, our budding scientists. And it's our job to make sure that they are equipped and capable, have the knowledge, the curiosity, the resilience to do that, and can work in a global environment. It's not just about beating Shanghai. It's not about outscoring Finland. It's about how we're going to work on a global scale to solve these global problems. And if we do our job, our students will be well equipped to do that. Let's continue. We all know that the biggest difference makers are the teachers. And we have examples of the good, bad, and the ugly, I guess. Good, bad, yeah. Anyway, so some commonalities from the research. You can read this on your own. But the students expect teachers that are caring and respectful, that communicate the highest expectations and aspirations for all students, that realize that a student's potential when they come into our classrooms in our district is largely untapped and unrecognized. Because wherever we think it is, when those students are given the appropriate supports, access opportunities, it is well above and beyond that. So we talked with the faculty at, go ahead, Tabitha, and at opening day about, what does it mean to be a high-quality teacher? And this is work from Ron Ferguson, who has done significant research at Harvard on closing the achievement gap. And we reviewed each of these about how teachers make class engaging. My teacher is relentless. In other words, my teacher will not let me fail. My teacher wants us to think, not just reiterate what they learn, not just memorize. My teacher welcomes questions. My teacher uses multiple explanations when students don't understand. And we spent some time on this with our entire staff. Let's continue. What we learned from the smartest kids in the world, the importance of this school culture, the importance of leaderships in establishing a school culture, and this is a quote from the book, I call it the only way to assure that all children learn the rigorous higher order thinking they need to thrive is create a serious intellectual culture, one that kids can sense is real and true. And so you'll hear a little more about this. You'll see these themes echoed in our goals later tonight. And let's just close. I'd like to, I think, close with this slide. These transition times are really tough for parents. At Duveneck, at the ribbon cutting, we had the kindergarten parents with the Kleenexes. And I spent yesterday, it seems apparently over at Terman with the 6th grade, delivering cookies. And the 6th graders all seem they're like this big, and the 8th graders are, but I talked to a couple of the parents, and they say, yeah, I was kind of misty, even over 6th grade. 9th grade, maybe the parents feel a little differently. But I don't think so. I had the opportunity Sunday to spend some time with parents of juniors at Pally, and they were sharing how they felt when their children went off to high school in 9th grade. And I had a meeting this afternoon with a gentleman whose daughter went to 9th grade this year. And so these transition times are the toughest, and we, I think as parents and as educators, we worry most about these transition times. So why this slide? This was the last 6th grade class I taught. These were 6th graders in 1979, and they grew from these little 6th graders to adults. This was the lowest reading group called Bee Bumble and the Stingers, named after a very, very old rock and roll group. Lynn is a Bee Bumble. Lynn is graduated from Northern University, works for early childhood at Park District, and her daughter, she has 2 daughters, one who's going to be a teacher. Craig over there on the right became an Eagle Scout, sells insurance, and Paul in the back is now a medical doctor. And Jerry Carlin with a shaved head was a class clown and still is. Some things never change. Mark Kaplanis in the front to my right. Mark was not a typical, very good reader or writer, but he was brilliant in mathematics. Imagine that you can be really good in one thing and not so good in another. We actually, in 6th grade, bought Mark a programmed learning book. That was well before the internet. For Algebra 2. He was doing Algebra 2 at 11 years old, yet struggling with reading and writing. And Rocco Versacchi is probably the greatest success story. Rocco's on my far right up there. Rocco's a cancer survivor, very much of a C student in 6th grade. He really liked to think, though. He really liked to think, and he loved to read. Couldn't write very well, and reading didn't come easily. Rocco is now a professor of English at Palomar University, and on his Facebook page there's a picture of his son holding this giant trophy like the Stanley Cup for winning the English award at his high school. So I think it just goes to show that through these transition times, and as nervous as we can be, when students are given the appropriate support and the trust, the faith, and given caring teachers throughout the system, that they will not just survive, but really thrive as adults. So let's close there, and thank you for a few opening comments. So with that, I'd like to make a few introductions, if I may.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I'm going to start with our administrative team out here, and we're just going to ask you to stand and wave, but I would like to spend just a minute introducing everyone. And Tanya, I'm going to start with you. You were the first here, so you get to be first, okay? Tanya Bailey is the assistant principal at Terman.
Can we get him on camera?
Do you want to come to the podium? So
you want him? I told him I didn't have to.
Yeah,
so.
we want him on camera.
Why don't you all come up as a group then?
Yeah,
Let's do that. Can we all?
that'd be nice.
Yeah, let's have the whole group up there if we could. That'd be great.
So those at home can see you.
That's right. We have a TV viewing audience.
Yes, we do.
All right.
Welcome.
James, that
Excellent.
that's you too, buddy. There you go.
All right.
All right. Tiny, can you just say? So I guess you better pull out those notes. No. Tiny, the assistant principal at Terman, one of our later hires. She has experience as elementary and middle school assistant principal, given several professional presentations on reading and writing and on the Common Core standards, and just has a big personality and a terrific presenter. And maybe that came from your big family background where you had to have your own voice. But Tanya, we are so glad to have you here. So welcome to Palo Alto Unified School District as assistant principal at Terman Middle School.
Thank you.
All right, great. And I guess we'll go in alphabetical order. Constance. Constance is going to be our special education coordinator, and she has background as a research specialist, assistant principal. She's also been a contributing editor and writer to Holt Mifflin series on K-3 curriculum, and she's a great singer.
Oh,
And right, for our Reduce, Reuse, Recycle team, helped author a little parody down the road again. But working with these special ed students is really quite a gift that you have, and we're so grateful that you're bringing your gifts to us and to work with this population that really needs and deserves everything that we can give them. So welcome, Constance.
Thank you.
And Tara, joined by Addie, first 18-month-old.
Yeah.
And her husband, a fifth grade teacher. Tara's going to be our new dean in TOSA over at Gunn, and which is pretty interesting because she's been a Pally the last few years, right? Last 2 years. And rumor has it that she even went to the interview at Gunn wearing Pally green and still got hired. So I don't know how you infiltrated that, but it was certainly, I know, on the quality of your work and your expertise, not just in in our district, but also your background in special education and the work that you've done as a teacher for these special education students. We're very excited that you'll be a dean in Tosa Gun. We're very excited to welcome your husband as a new teacher, 5th grade teacher at Dubnica as well, Tara. And I know your daughter, Addie, is here with us tonight running about. So, Tara, it's good to have you again in a new role, but I know you will continue the great work for which we expect and which you've done so far. So welcome, Tara.
Thank you.
Great, and now James Louie. And I got to know James during our back to school great race too, and he's joined here while his wife Netta is in the back, and his mother's here tonight. So welcome. We like to think of our district as a family, and this is very special, James, that you brought your family with you. 2 daughters, Nadia, Turman, right? I saw you the other day. Good to see you. And Hanako is in kindergarten in Briones, so we know what's that like. You got 2 transitions in one family this year, right? Wow. And I guess a 3rd with your job here. James comes to us with a broad background of everything ranging from teaching physical education to be a dean of students in San Mateo. James has already made an impact with the students at Gun, hitting the ground running, and already knows so many of the students so well and is well respected by the staff. And I was almost surprised to see you here just because I know our early conversations. I felt like I was talking to somebody that had already been here for years, and you've hit the ground running and haven't stopped. And so welcome our new dean at Gun High School.
Actually, I've been here for 6 years.
James Libby. You're 6 years, okay, new position. So that's why it does seem like you've been here 6 years. And Hillary.
Voices.
Hillary's here. All right. I just met Hillary today, and also has 2 students in the district, and has a background here working in our school district as well. I think since 2011.
Yes.
And before that was at Ravenswood, has been an administrator over there. Worked with special education as well. Hillary is now the JLS assistant principal, and I don't know how you find time to do this with this job and 2 kids, but we'll be running the New York Marathon.
I am Halloween weekend. Well,
Halloween weekend.
I'm still striving to get all my training in. We'll see.
Wow.
Wow.
Well, you'll be able to eat as much sugar as you want after that, right? So, yeah.
Getting this job.
Welcome, Hillary. It's great to see you at JLS. And then we have Adam Paulson. Adam has actually experience as an elementary school principal and an assistant principal in the middle school level, and now you're going to be at the high school. So there you go. And but I think that's important to see this progression, and it's I think it will really inform your work at the high school and that of others as well, Adam. Adam is going to be the dean in Tosa. And I understand also a savory cook on demand. So I hear you have quite the culinary talent.
I have a little bit of touch. So.
Good, but we're looking for that special touch with our students, which we know you'll bring with us great experience. So welcome, Adam Paulson.
You're welcome.
And then Sabrina from Kalamazoo, originally.
Michigan.
I just love saying that name.
Yeah.
Sabrina Yakub, and we got to know each other pretty well on that with that great race. That was really fun, bringing all these faces together, veterans and new folks as well. Sabrina has a background in special education and has really made a career out of that, has worked both in public schools and in charter schools. And I had the opportunity to share a little talk with her, a little more with her, some 200 special education aides and assistants here. And I know already they've already spoken so highly of you as a leader and a coordinator, and that's quite an accomplishment just in a few short weeks. So Sabrina, the pride of Kalamazoo, we are so glad you're here and looking forward to a great year together.
Thank you so much. And I think
do we want to do the construction piece before we introduce? See, you guys are like the feature presentation. This is like the Emmys. You'll be the last ones, and here you go. So, but we did want to do the construction. Then I'll introduce our school board members, and we'll hear their report. So, Bob, we'll turn this over to you.
Thank you, Max. We're pleased with the facilities that we've opened up this fall. This was a very busy summer for us, and this is only a sampling our major projects, and we're glad to provide these for the students and the faculty. This is the gun parking and drop-off off of Miranda. This is the look going down from Miranda, and then here's this really nice turnoff. The next slide shows a kind of a view of the surface along with the K building in the background. We had a number of other projects at this site, and among them was modernization of the E and K buildings. The next slide is our media arts building. 9 classrooms with, let's see, focusing on this one, I happen to be in Phoenix, and this is modeled after the Walter Cronkite building in the journalism building at the University of Arizona State. And the next slide is another look at that building from the exterior, and the next slide is this incredibly nice area that there are just all kinds of uses for it, and this was taken before school started, and now at any particular time in the day you can see students who are there talking and working on projects and the like. And the next slide is one of the classroom buildings, this media arts building. I'm not showing the bathrooms, but actually I was in the museum in Washington, D.C., and what did I see but tiles in those bathrooms with wording on them, and these bathrooms have the same thing, so it's just all good. Next is the 26th classroom, this brand new Pally classroom building with math on the second floor and the social sciences classrooms on the first floor. And another view of that building. And next is Duvenick Elementary School, our big project. This is 8 classroom building with an office as well that houses now their 4th and 5th grade, and there is this very nice sod that's been planted. You can kind of see it's rough off to the left because the left part is this is all new play area. The left part is the older play area, and as soon as this takes root, then off we go, and we'll be redoing the older part. Next is a look at one of the classrooms, and after that is a view of the Building 2 and Building 3. Very easy to remember. This is from the second floor in the new classroom building because Building 2 has 2 classrooms and Building 3 has 3. Next, there's a really nice library. This library is great with a very good workspace for the librarian that's kind of behind those windows, and then if we could look backwards, we would see a library classroom. So they have a lot of room for instruction. And that is my story for this evening. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you, Bob. Good. So if I may then move on to the, great. So I don't know if you did rock, paper, scissors for who talks first, but I'll just go left to right. So well, I'd like to introduce Rose, our senior from Gunn High School, and I first met Rose. She said, I've been in the district 17 years. And her mom teaches physics, and she's been here since she was a toddler. And I really appreciated our time together. I mean, looking forward to your report, Rose. And Rose has actually lived in Kathmandu, right, in Nepal for a few years. And so we got to talk about some excellent adventures as well as issues related to education. And Carolyn and I had a chance to talk over at Pally the other day. Carolyn we shared some ideas about traveling in France. I wish I could speak as well. She does. She's a French AP student and also
Oh.
has 2 other AP classes. So
Wow.
you can be excused whenever you want. Just don't ask us to help with your homework. But welcome, Rose and Carolyn, and I know you had a few things to share with the board, so and have the opportunity to talk among yourselves a bit as well.
Okay. Should I turn this on?
It's on. It's on.
No, is the green light on?
Now it is.
No.
Okay.
Good.
So we both talked to our student governments respectively, and we have a report on what's happening at the school, but we also have a list of issues that they asked us to bring up. We found that those issues tended to be consensus, but we're going to start with our reports on what has happened since and then go to that. So as you may know, this is a very big year for Gun. It is our 50th anniversary. We're all very excited about that. We also are welcoming a new principal, Dr. Herman. Students are very excited about her. It's a new change, a new feel for the school. Our year began for many of us on August 13th with our freshman orientation. That included our first Titan 101 lesson for the class of 2018, where they met their Titan ambassadors and Titan coaches. It's our bridge program for freshmen. For our first day of school, as Mr. McGee mentioned, we were the Greek underworld as the seniors, and we took over the quad. It's a lot of fun. Today was actually our opening assembly, in which we announced our homecoming theme, which I am happy to say this year is Gun's Golden Anniversary Party. So look forward to that. Coming up this week is our freshman elections, and we actually have record high participation. We have about 8 people applied for each position, and there's only 3 of them. So hopefully that ends up okay. And this year we are also launching our new student buddy program to help team up with transfer students, with current students.
Okay. So Pally had a very successful first week. We started out with freshman orientation the week before school, where we had 100 Link Crew upperclassmen leaders orienting about, I think, 400 freshmen. So, and Mr. Hall, the teacher in charge of that, said it was one of the most successful orientations we've ever had. Our first Friday rally and the back to school dinner that we had were all very successful as well. Pally's ASB also canceled our back to school dance because they didn't feel as if it would be profitable, and they said that they would prefer to save the money up for a bigger, better event. On September 19th for our kickoff football game at Pally, the ASB was also thinking of doing a tailgate sort of event, possibly with food trucks. And the ASB student government class also introduced 4 committee systems within itself this year, and those include school pride, school climate and culture, school fundraising, and an ASB bonding and team building committee. ASB would also like to say that they invite the board members to come and judge our Spirit Week activities and floats. And lastly, that the ASB wanted to reiterate that they're always available if the school board wants any advice or input or anything of that sort.
Wow. Nice. Thank you.
Ditto for Gun on that one.
Okay. Great. Thank you.
Do we want to? And then there were a couple of problems that were kind of common in Gun and Pally that we wanted to address. So one of them was that the ASB student government felt that their opinions were being ignored by the school board.
I guess, at least at Gun, we heard a lot about, students maybe not knowing where to put their advice or input towards the school board. Obviously these board meetings are open to anyone, but the surveys don't leave a lot of space. People don't know when board meetings are. The information is not necessarily accessible to students on how to contact the school board to voice their opinion. The one I was going to talk about.
Transportation.
Transportation, that was something that we actually both had, being that traffic, unsafe for bikers, are all issues that students are feeling more this year. I don't know why, but it's an issue.
And I guess tying back to the first thing, Pally's student government wanted the school board to be more transparent and communicate, I guess, more directly with students, and kind of make students more aware of policies that are going on and different 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 things that are going on, and just making the students aware of what's going on here.
Could you give some examples
Um,
of the kinds of things you'd like us to communicate more directly?
Yeah, so one example was our ASB president went around last year and surveyed students about the homework policy and what they thought about it, and a lot of the students just said, what homework policy? They had no idea that this even existed. So I think it's just kind of, there's a lack of awareness of what's going on here.
I guess there are decisions that are made at the school level and we don't always understand where they come from, and a lot of that is policies that are set by the school board, and that's just inconsistent in the minds of the students. What am I talking about? Speaking of being inconsistent, something else that was brought up was in terms of curriculum and between departments and between the schools, that, you know, a class labeled the same thing is completely different based on the teacher and totally different if you go to Pally or Gunn. So that is just an issue, and we'd like to see a bit more of a consistency within the curriculum.
Yeah.
We're going to weigh in on that one a little later. But yeah, the girls had briefed me on this, and I said, you know, we're not going to address all these tonight, but I think they're important to just keep, you know, at the front of our mind as we go through the year. And I think it was you, Rose, that said, when I was asking them why they wanted to be on here, said, yeah, this is where really important decisions are made, and right?
Yeah.
And I want to be part of it. So you, and part of the communication is you take them back what you learn here, too. So.
When do you meet in your student governments? When do you meet once a week or?
It's a class period for Gunn at least, and it's a rotating schedule. So if you want to stop by, let us know beforehand because it's a crazy schedule.
At Pally, the student government class runs every third period. I'm not enrolled in ASB because I'm not required to when I have other classes, but I usually come at the beginning of the period before I have a board meeting, and then after I have a board meeting to report.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Well, we would like to welcome both of you. It's a pleasure to meet you tonight, Rose and Carolyn. You did a great job on your first night, and as Dr. McGee said, I think the first item on the agenda will interest you quite a bit, and we'll be sure to listen to your thoughts as those come up. Great introductions, Dr. McGee. That was fun, bringing in a lot of new energy and talent to the district. Is always fun. So we are going to move on with that to our agenda, which is next the approval of the consent calendar. These items are considered routine and will be approved in one action without discussion unless a board member or a member of the public would like to pull an item for discussion. And if there are none, I would entertain a motion to approve the consent calendar.
I move that we approve the consent calendar as presented.
Do I have
Second.
Good. All those in favor?
Aye.
Great, all right. So let's see, we have 8 discussion items, 3 information items, and 1 action item ahead of us. But first, we have open forum, and do we have any cards for open forum? I see some cards for goals. Okay, anybody want to speak in open forum? Okay, so we will move on to our action, discussion, and information items, beginning with the 2014-15 draft Board of Education goals. Dr. McGee.
Good. Thank you very much. And Tabitha, if you could put the opening slide up there. I thought we'd begin with the first 2 slides. The first is our vision statement. The second and third you'll see in a moment, our strategic plan. What these goals will do is to put these important words into action. We're presenting 5 goals tonight, and these are in draft form. We spent some time at the board retreat talking about these, see if we're fine, but they're still in draft form at this point. And they're big goals. And along with each of those goals, we have some specific measures and deliverables to make sure that we achieve them. The idea is to develop clear accountabilities for achieving each of these goals. And again, this goes along with the idea of building a collective community where we have a shared vision, we have a strategic plan, and now we will have some shared goals at the leadership level. We've all heard the phrase, mi casa su casa, my house is your house, my goals are your goals, looking at the leadership team. This will involve really everyone in the district, not just the leaders at the table. It will involve leaders with the PTA, PI, the associations, everyone working together to accomplish these. I know it will take some work, as you'll see as we review the goals, and again, I'm not going to read every measure and deliverable. We'll highlight a few on each one. This year we'll be providing updates at least quarterly, perhaps monthly, that we can discuss in more detail either tonight or at our next meeting. So for these next few moments then, I'd like to share the goals one by one, then turn it back to the board chair for discussion. So let's begin. We have the vision statement, which we've read and seen before. And then this, of course, from this emanates a strategic plan. And we have seen the logo for this. And our really one-page summary, if we could go to that, which you can't read here. It's certainly accessible through all sorts of public information documents. Because each goal we tied to a specific area in the strategic plan, and you will be able to see those starting with goal 1. So if we could pull that up, Tabitha, great, thanks. So to prepare students for a future that necessitates global collaboration and competition, our goal is to cultivate support for a district-wide culture that expects, advances, inspires, and promotes academic excellence, hard work, active engagement, and perseverance for every student. These words are of course, embedded in our strategic plan, but they're also research-based. And we have found this from some of the readings that we've done this year. We found this from experience. And so what we want to do then is we look at this goal is to have some specific measures and deliverables. And let me pull out my little cheat sheet on that. We don't have these highlighted, but a few that I wanted to share this evening. One was about using data to improve instruction. And we talk about the specific measure of sharing data from receiving schools to sending schools. In other words, really working hard with sharing data from the 6th grade, after first semester of 6th grade, with our elementary teachers, our elementary leadership team. Sharing data on 9th grade student achievement with our middle school leaders, our middle school teachers. And then also working on finding out what happens when students go off to college, whether we use National Clearinghouse data. We're also members of our 21st Century Consortium. We are conducting an alumni survey at this point. And so the idea is that we would use this data to see if it's what we expect or to see where we need to make some changes. We are a unit district. We are a collective community. And I know the teachers talk among one another. They send folders to the next grade. Some are probably read thoroughly, some probably less so. But I think if we're doing a good job, we need to see what happens to those students at the next level. And so we want to report back on the board at the end of the first semester about what we've learned from looking at this data. And I know there's actually looking, when we talk about the high school, moving out of high school into secondary education, there's actually a significant amount of data available for students that go to the public universities about the remedial courses they take, for example. Are our students as successful as we think they are, or what percentage are remedial classes? There's data on if the students enroll a second year. So many students go off to school that first year, but not everybody comes back a second year. And again, I think if we've done our job and done it well, we will see that we have a high rate of continuation into the second year. Another deliverable that we have is, let me call your attention to 1G. And this is where we really talk about the equity of access and opportunities. I've asked staff to complete an action plan to assure equity of preparation, access, and support for historically underserved students. And the idea of an action plan, the key word there is action. And we want to do some work to make sure that all of our students have nothing less than the highest quality of education. This includes access to material resources, assuring students have access to, training in, and opportunity to use instructional technologies. Access to human resources. Are we able to provide these students with tutoring if they need it, additional assistance after school and during the summer? Assistance in applying to college. And I heard at the PAS meeting on Saturday about how parents and teachers have supported students taking the ACT, paying for ACT, transporting students to ACT. My wife and I actually have had some experience doing this back in Chicago. Because we want our students to all think college bound, to think beyond college. And so we want to make sure that they have the opportunity to have college visits, to have help if they are preparing for APs and SATs. And we need to have an action plan that addresses that. I'm very interested in talent development in underrepresented youth, whether from low-income families, minority families. There's been some really terrific research on this from the University of Indiana, from the Jack Kent Cooke Foundation, about how minority students, low-income students of talent often go under-identified, unrecognized in their talent's language. And so part of this plan may actually entail putting together a task force on talent development for these students. And again, I heard some very interesting and informative anecdotal stories, as did Melissa, about students of color, students from low-income families who are extraordinarily talented and can make contributions, I think, even more than has been expected in the past. Equity training. We have equity training for new teachers, and it's a 2-year program. We're excited about that, but it may be time for a refresher course for all teachers. We have sexual harassment training every 2 years. And I'm sitting here, I went through the 3-hour training and learned a lot. And I've been in education 42 years and had plenty of training on this, but I learned something every time. And I think as part of this action plan, this report, we may want to consider really looking at equity training because I think unconscious bias is something that it's called unconscious bias for a reason. Because people don't realize it, and I think the same case was a sexual harassment training. People do things that they wouldn't necessarily think as sexual harassment. But when you have this kind of training, it raises awareness. It makes people think, and maybe it's time to expand this beyond our new teachers. Again, these are just some specific actions and deliverables. We talked at the board retreat about revising the SIPSA plan format, not this year, but the following year. To align it with this goal of supporting a culture that expects, advances, inspires, and promotes academic excellence. So if it's okay, Barbara, I'd like to go through all the goals and then come back to the discussion. I know I sense there's some eagerness to talk now. If that's okay, if we could just... Okay. Okay, thanks. Let's move on to goal 2. Create conditions that assure consistent, high quality, and fairness in curriculum instruction and assessment, while affording individual schools autonomy to design, develop, implement, and evaluate innovative practices and programs aligned with the district's strategic plan. This is an important issue of balance. Again, balancing the autonomy, what's so special about each and every one of our schools' cultures, the character that they have, with the idea that we do have a district strategic plan, a district mission, a district vision, and the need for high quality and fairness across the board. And when I was talking with the girls about it, they jumped at it. I mean, Rosa just probably jumped out of her seat at this. Yeah, and I want to add a word, so you'll have your chance in a few moments to jump onto this. But this is, as I've been talking with parents around the district, whether it's parents of Pally Juniors, the PAS, individual meeting to leadership team, this one seems to have resonated, the importance of the balance. And I want to emphasize the balance. This is not just consistency and uniformity. It says affording individual schools the autonomy to design. And I think that design, that word is in there for a reason. We need to think about how we design innovations, not just come up with an idea. We really need to think ready, aim, fire. Design, develop, implement, not just let's do it and see what happens. But the fourth verb there in that second piece is about evaluating innovative practices and programs. And that's one thing I don't think that historically we've done terribly well, not just here, but in education across the country. And certainly I'll speak to my former places of employment as well. We don't do it because it's hard to do. And sometimes the results aren't always as great as we want. But when here we are in the heart of Silicon Valley, right, where they talk about incubators, they talk about startups, and they depend on evaluating innovations. And we need to do the same. And if we evaluate them thoroughly and find they work, then we ought to disseminate them from one school to another, and perhaps beyond. But let's get from one school to another. Some specific measures and deliverables we have there. Talking about a consistent look and feel for website templates among all our schools. They all have really nifty websites, but you'll be hard-pressed to find the vision statement and links to the strategic plan on all of them. They are navigated differently by and large, and we want to make sure that we have the sense of district mission and vision there. We're looking for to present and pilot a system for internally evaluating the impact of new programs and practices on teaching and learning. Today, Charles and I had a conversation with the principals of Pally and Gunn and one of the tech directors talking about Chromebooks, and we have a nice gift for Chromebooks. So our first question is, how do we know what impact they will have on teaching and learning? And before we approve that gift, even as superintendent, before I say, yeah, I want to take this forward, I want to see an evaluation plan. And to their credit there, this is great, we'll have one this week. I mean, I think when you expect it, people roll up their sleeves and really want to do a good job on this. But we're also looking at written proposals for external review of selected programs that we have. And I think the idea of an external review is an important one. These can be expensive, they can be time-consuming, but people have, we have to conduct an external audit every year. We audit our books. How often do we audit some of our high-profile programs? And this would be on a cycle. Again, this is a measure deliverable, something we can bring back to the board. But we're looking for the idea of bringing a team to externally review a program. And it would not be more than one or two every year. But I think this is something, again, where we need to really look hard at what we do. And if we're doing it well, that's great. We can do probably some things better. If we're not doing it well, we'll learn. We'll learn what we can do better. Let me move to goal 3. To provide all students the highest quality, in order to provide all students with the highest quality learning environment in every Palo Alto school, we want to assure that all certificated and classified staff are continuously engaged in professional learning that is aligned with specific strategic school improvement goals that are tied directly to the district's strategic plan. There's a Richard Elmore in one of those books that we saw early on at the beginning of the meeting, and others have written about the importance of professional development and its value, basically if and only if it's on a school level. In other words, it's nice that faculty, the staff can go out and learn something and bring it back to their class of 30, maybe 80 if they're teaching middle school or high school, maybe 100. But it really is just an episodic support for a student. If we're putting students first and foremost, we need to think about how they move through our entire district. And so professional development really needs to be tied to school improvement goals, to our district strategic plan. And Kelly, under Charles's leadership and others, and working with the principals, has done such a terrific job with this My Learning Plan piece. She introduced it at the meeting today with support of Barb and Catherine, our elementary and secondary education directors, for a way for people to record their professional development plan to assure that it is tied to these goals and that they have to reflect and evaluate how it impacts their teaching and learning. So this is new and this is hard work. We'll see what fidelity there is in completing it, and we'll get some data back on this. Along these lines, we also want to impact the professional learning on in all areas of the district, whether it's mathematics, whether it's science. I focused on writing for this measure and deliverable primarily because what we have professional development for 100 teachers or 100 staff members. Is that right? Or how many staff members in our writing project this summer, Charles? Over 100. So we put a great deal into this a writing project with Columbia Teachers College, and really have some great hopes and dreams for how the faculty can help improve the quality of writing. We need to evaluate that. We need to see if this investment in professional development has returns in terms of student learning. Moving down the measures and deliverables, this year we have ERB results. Ideally, we'll be moving into our smarter, balanced, formative, and summative assessments when we can look beyond just writing into mathematics and other areas tested to see if, again, what we're trying to do with professional development is making a difference in student learning. With both the ERB and the Smarter Balance, we'll be able to see how we do compared to similar schools, similar school districts, disaggregate the data among and between various groups. Let me move to goal 4. I'll try to do this a little more quickly for goal 4 and 5. I'm going to turn a piece of goal 4. We're doing okay? I know I got behind at the beginning.
No, it's good. It's good.
Okay. Goal 4, develop clear accountabilities for ensuring implementation of key strategic plan initiatives, our focus goals. Those veterans in the audience and our viewing audience at home included, maybe you're seeing something different than the usual presentation on the focus goals where we really dig into the strategic plan and look at those initiatives. Fear not, we're going to do that now. But our board level work really needs to be around the policy and making sure that the staff is accountable for getting this work of the strategic plan done. So this year what I'm proposing to the board is that we hold the staff, present company included, accountable for achieving the focus goals. But it really is the business of the staff to identify those focus goals. We have reviewed them with the board at the retreat and to make sure that we get the job done. We'll be bringing back these focus goals quarterly to the board to review. But I'd like to ask Charles to go through the focus goals because they really hit every area of the strategic plan. We're not going to go into the metrics on the focus goals tonight, but just really, unless the board wants a later discussion. But now, Charles, if you could go through each of those goal areas and highlight the focus goals under each of those, that'd be great.
You bet. Thank you, Dr. McGee. What I'd like you to do is turn to your board packet where you see the first section in the strategic plan called Academic Excellence and Learning. And what I thought I would do is point out the initiatives that we're going to focus on to get after the goals that Dr. McGee talked about. So we think in looking at the documents that we've been working with, last year we worked on the LCAP, if you all recall that, and there are 3 big areas that we needed to address: conditions of learning, pupil outcomes, and student engagement, and there's a number of areas for each of those categories, and then we have our strategic plan. And what we're feeling good about is we have a nice convergence of what Dr. McGee is talking about, which is the what we need to get after this year. And then what I'm going to talk about is the how. How do we get after the work, the action plan. So the LCAP and the focus goals, there's a good convergence there. So what I'd like to do is just point out to you the initiatives for each of the areas that we will be focusing on to get after the goals that Dr. McGee talked about. And I'll just take a moment to read them. I won't talk about the actions. As a reminder, you have initiatives on the left, and then you have a number of actions on the right. We, in the past, and what we've done this year in alignment with Dr. McGee's goals in LCAP, is to pick selected action items in order to get after the initiatives. Obviously, this is a strategic plan that should guide us for 5 years. We can't do everything every year, so we shine the light on the items that we think are most important for this year. So quickly, the initiatives, we're going to get after all 3 of those in A. Not all of the actions, but again, we'll be doing something for each of those initiatives. So A1 is to differentiate the educational experience, to effectively engage, appropriately challenge, and ensure mastery for every student. A2, ensure post-secondary preparation by implementation of the Common Core state standards and all of the subject areas that we're working on right now, English language arts, and all that goes into that, in mathematics. Improving feedback for students and increasing consistency. Common Core also includes our work around science standards that were adopted last year. A3, significantly raise the achievement of historically underserved students by ensuring equity of preparation, access, and support. Under B, I'd like to point out that this is an ongoing and very important area for the district. I'm going into my 4th year here, And the moment I started in this district, it struck me the value and the importance that this district places on the social and emotional well-being of students. It's important to us. We value it. We're very intentional with the work around it. So we will continue to get after that in some very powerful ways, I believe. But the initiatives that we'll be focusing our efforts on this year are foster personal development and health of students through social, emotional, behavioral, and physical supports and services. And as you recall, in the past, we do a yearly report on all of the kinds of programs that take place at the school sites to support this effort. And we talk about 41 developmental assets and Project Cornerstone and the Walter Hayes Way and all of that good work that takes place out there. That will continue. An area that we're kind of shining a light on, last year we started a committee called the Safe and Welcoming Schools Initiative. That will continue. And what that group does is focus on this effort at its school sites and what programs are working well and how can we continue to inform that effort. So we'll continue to get after that. And another part of this personal development and support category is training and support and development around the implementation of our board policy with bullying prevention and supporting kids around that, so that we passed that board policy and administrative regulations, a very good document, and we've got some training set up, and we will be getting after that rigorously during the course of the year. Moving along quickly under C, which is innovative staff development and recruitment, the initiative there that will be focusing on C1, foster a culture of relevant and effective professional growth among all staff to develop a community of learners. And that's that one initiative that we're centering on with accompanying actions. If you move to budget, under optimized budget and infrastructure, the initiative that we've selected there is to optimize the use of resources for maximum impact on student learning. And under E, the initiatives that we've selected there are two, and they are to engender trust with the community through frequent, clear, transparent, and varied communication. And the other one is E2, which is to provide a clear district approach to align sites on key areas, particularly curriculum, course consistency, safety protocols, measuring impact, special needs support, while continuing to support site innovation. It's a lot, but I would just like everybody to know that we're feeling good about the convergence of LCAP, strategic plan, the goals that Dr. McGee has talked about, and it is a lot. But we're confident we can get after the work, and it's coming together nicely.
Thanks, Charles. And you're absolutely right. There's probably a nifty graphic we could make that shows how this flows from the vision to the strategic plan, to the big goals, to the focus goals. And that's the idea, this collective mission, this collective vision, everybody working on accomplishing some great things. Let me close with a final goal, and there's a quick wording change. I'm sorry I didn't, yeah, we did crash it. Okay, good. Anticipate, respond to, and promptly resolve potentially distracting and disruptive issues in order to maintain focus on the district's vision of, and I'm going to quote this once more, developing our students' knowledge, critical thinking, and problem-solving skills, deepening their knowledge, and nurturing their curiosity, creativity, and resilience, empowering every child to reach his or her fullest intellectual, social, and creative potential. In the other goals, I've just chosen just a few measures and deliverables. I'm going to highlight all these for a specific reason. I had the opportunity to meet with all 17, well actually 19 principals early on, and they talked about their worries about being too reactive. I feel so reactive. The girls, we talked tonight about the transparent and open communication, and we think we're pretty transparent and open, but if nobody else thinks you are, well, then you have some work to do. And so in this goal, what we're trying to do is it's really moving from proactive, or I think actually we've been proactive in many instances, but putting forth out there for everyone. We're going to be proactive. We're not just going to sit back and be reactive. So what are we going to do? What are the measures and deliverables for this goal? First of all, we're holding a lot of outreach events. And those of you who've heard me before know that I really believe in Covey's quote about seek first to understand and then be understood. And so the board members and I and other members of the leadership team, we're doing a lot of listening these first few weeks of school. We have a second cup of coffee at each of the school. The board members have been at various events. You know, Dana, I don't know, you were here till 10 o'clock, 9:30 at least, because I left at 9:30 and you were still going strong last night with a party group. Melissa gave up a Saturday afternoon. Heidi, Camille, Barb, I mean, we want to hear what's on your mind. So we're holding ourselves accountable for that. The second measure is to create a baseline of positive, neutral, and negative media reports related to the district. And, you know, some people think, well, you know, why? My experience is, while it's not a perfect measure, generally organizations which are seen as open, responsive, proactive, and forthright have fewer negative reports. You know, there will be mistakes made, things will happen. That comes with the territory. But again, by being proactive, by being forthright, by being upfront, by looking around corners, anticipating problems, we want to create this baseline so we can look month after month, year after year, see how we're doing. The third measure is an analysis of response time to board-level correspondence, open forum comments, and other sources where stakeholders register complaints. Not everything can be handled overnight, but we can at least, you know, give a timeline and make sure that we do respond and respond appropriately. I know one of the biggest frustrations in all of education, and I can't speak for PAUSD, but I can speak for where I've been before, when whether it's me or whether it's others have not been as responsive as they need to be. And complaints are left out there, and then they grow life and legs of their own. So we want to make sure that we hold ourselves accountable for responding quickly. The fourth point is at the board retreat, we discussed the importance of 360 evaluations. And so that for me, for the leadership team, so we, you know, our first, we have lots of customers, but some of our customers are those whom we supervise. And I find when I've done 360 evaluations in the past, I've learned an awful lot where I thought I've been doing pretty well, and my staff have told me, well, you could get better, in so many words. But I think as leaders, we need to set an example by holding ourselves accountable for these 360 evaluations. And that, I want to share with the board, that came up at the board retreat. That was, you know, from the board, and that was really well received by our council members. So, you know, I think we're going forward with that. We'll be excited about that. The final one is to design, develop, and deliver a proactive communications plan incorporating multiple media and multiple messengers. You know, communication's everyone's business, and you know, the girls talked about, you know, hearing from the board. Well, you know, part of this is the board's job. Part of it is the administrator's job too. And if we're doing our job well, it's, you know, you can't just rely on 5 people up here. This is a district, and we have to think, if you're not getting the message, we're not doing it effectively, and we're not using the media we should be. And I got a kick tonight. The girls had to have confirmation or corroboration that they were here at the meeting. And, you know, I heard, we're going to put this on Facebook right away. You know, there's lots of different ways to communicate. We need to take advantage of these different media and different messengers. And so, you know, we're going to be counting on you to do some transparent and open communication yourself. Anyway, I'll stop there. Thank you for indulging what became kind of a long presentation, but I think an important one. So, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Dr. McGee. All well spent, detail-wise. So we have 3 cards from the community, and I know we have 2 student reps who I think have some ideas that the board will want to hear. And then, if it's all right with the board, we start with those 2, and then we're going to start down with Mr. Tom and come this way with your questions. So this is a discussion item, as you all know. We're not taking any action on it tonight. It will come back in 2 weeks for action. So this is an opportunity to clarify what Dr. McGee has said and what is in writing, address any questions that you have, and then it'll come back. So let's start with community members, and then I'm going to go to students if you'd like to kind of collect any thoughts or questions you may have. All right? Thank you, Dr. McGee. So we have 3 cards. beginning with Mary Vincent, Barbara Sloan, and Ken Dauber. Welcome. If you could come to the podium. As you know, I think you're all returning guests, and we have 3 minutes for each of you. So, and do we have this set up? I think it's on. Good. All right. So, welcome, Mary.
I could just start, right?
Yep.
Okay. Overall, I read all this, and I'm super happy to see where we're going to be measuring things and really quantifying things and looking at data and making data-driven decisions. So that I'm very happy with that. I'm very encouraged by Dr. McGee's past working with I'm happy to see that we're going to look at the connection between the elementary schools and the middle schools, and that's come up a number of times, especially in reading, in the area of reading, where kids kind of, they go okay through 5th grade, then they fall off a cliff. And in my family circle of friends, there are 2 little boys. One went to Jordan, and that's when his parents realized he was at 3rd grade reading level, and another one was at 2nd grade reading level. So that explains dropping off the cliff, because reading comprehension is so important. And I love the theme of the consistency in the instruction, the course load, the grading, the teaching, the curriculum. And I have something that I thought was very funny when I heard it, and I guess as a math teacher who doesn't give partial credit, you only get credit if you have the exact answer right. I'm thinking, oh my God, I get partial credit all the time. I'm a mom, but I'm not even sure I'm a very good one. I'm a cook, and I know I'm not a good one. You know, everything I do, I get partial credit. So this the idea that there's no partial credit in life, I think, I'm not sure that's true. So anyway, that just kind of struck me funny, because I thought I count it on all the time. So anyway, overall, I'm very encouraged. I'm very encouraged that you want clear accountability and people to be forthright in terms of supporting students in the services on A3. We have raised awareness of available resources. The Student Services Fair is coming up, I know, and it was a huge success last year. And I anticipate it'll even be bigger this year. But one feedback that I got from several people is, well, this is great that there's things out in the community, but what about in schools? And I think especially in the high schools, we have great programs like ARC at Pally, which is Academic Resource Center, where you can get tutoring, but it ends at 4. You know, so it would be nice if we could take some things that we have and just expand it a little bit, because I think it's a lot easier for kids to get to resources on campus than off campus and during the day. And the bullying training, I think is really important, because I think we do have an excellent policy and we just need to roll it out. And I'm sure we will.
Thank you, Mary.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Vincent. Barbara Sloan, followed by Ken Dauber.
I would like to welcome Dr. McGee to Palo Alto. And I think many of us in town are very excited to have you here and are strongly supportive of all the new, fresh perspective that you are bringing. I've lived in Palo Alto nearly all of my life. I was born here, I went to school here, and I graduated from Pali, and my boys did as well. And I'm very invested in our schools, and I appreciate Dr. McGee's obvious commitment and energy. I want to read one line in particular that struck me, quote, anticipate, respond, and promptly resolve potentially distracting and disruptive issues in order to maintain focus on the district's vision of, quote, developing our students' knowledge, critical thinking, and problem-solving skills, deepening their knowledge and nurturing their curiosity, creativity, and resilience, empowering every child to reach his or her fullest intellectual, social, and creative potential. There are 2 parts of that statement that I like. The first is that it states that the purpose of the school district is, in broad terms, We need to pay attention to the whole child, not only their intellectual potential, but also their social and creative potential. Many of us have been making the point that we don't need to trade off achievement on the one hand against social and emotional health on the other. We want children who are creative, happy problem solvers. The second part of the who can adapt to a changing world. And the second part of the statement that I like is that it commits the district to promptly resolving issues and moving past them, rather than letting them fester as a persistent distraction. I have definitely learned in my own life that it's better to face issues directly than to try and avoid them. And I think the district has suffered from too much defensiveness. The recent resolution on OCR is one good example. And so I'm encouraged that Dr. McGee is exhibiting the kind of forward-looking, proactive leadership that will really serve our school district well. So I am very encouraged about what I am seeing and hearing. And I hope that you adopt these goals and that you give Dr. McGee your full support to help him do the kind of job our students deserve. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sloan. Ken Dauber, followed by Srinivasan Subramanian and Catherine Crystal Foster.
Hi, welcome, Dr. McGee. I'm very happy to have you here and very pleased with what I heard from you tonight. And I want to talk particularly about a couple of your proposals that I think are particularly valuable as models for how we can better use data and evidence as inputs to decision making in the district. The first is the proposal to present a system for internally evaluating the impact of new programs and practices on teaching and learning. Because I think a prerequisite for that is that the district become more systematic and more capable about measuring how various educational practices impact teaching and learning. That is, how they're actually working for students. The district has an enormous amount of data, as you know, achievement data, data on social and emotional well-being, very fine-grained assessment data from teachers. If we can get to the point where we can evaluate the impact of a program change, for example, a new textbook or a new teaching method, then we'll also have a system that is a real resource for teachers and for parents on understanding student strengths and weaknesses. And I think there's a great opportunity here also for the community to bring its expertise. After all, we live in a community where this is a real expertise of parents. Web companies like Facebook and Google are all about figuring out what metrics are tied to success and understanding what changes have positive and negative impacts on them. The second proposal of Dr. McGee's that I want to highlight and support is about creating conditions that ensure consistent high quality and fairness across our school sites. I think it's fair to say that the district has not done as well in the past in ensuring consistency, particularly what I think Dr. McGee called horizontal consistency. And that's in part because of the philosophy of site-based control, which I think hasn't placed enough emphasis or balance, in Dr. McGee's words, on ensuring that all students get the same high-quality services across the district. But I think that we can have both. We can preserve innovation while ensuring consistency with the kind of data-based approach that Dr. McGee is suggesting. We can use evaluation to lift up innovations that work and propagate them across the district, but we can also get accountability for school sites that need to be doing better by using those same tools and techniques. So I think a data-based approach can also help with this issue about consistency. There's several substantive issues I think that are ripe for this kind of approach. One that I would point to in particular is homework policy. 2 years ago, we adopted a homework policy. Dr. Young led that committee. I served on it. What we don't know is how well that policy has been implemented and how well it works. What is the effect of the homework policy that we adopted both on teacher practices and on student experience? That's a prime area, I think, where the kind of approach that Dr. McGee is suggesting would be helpful, and I hope that you support his overall proposal and that kind of specific implementation. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Dauber. Srinivasan Subramanian and Catherine Crystal Foster.
Hi. I liked what I heard, and then I scribbled down some notes, and I'll just share that with you. The three areas are consistency, communications, and the last one I think, I want to touch on the commitment to actually follow through. On consistency, I have a slightly different view. I think Ken also mentioned about how do you innovate while preserving consistency. I think rather than trying to preserve external consistency, I think we should look at accessibility. Give students in Pali to take courses in Gun, vice versa. And that can be done through remote learning. There are, especially computer science, they can do assignments together and actually learn a lot more. So that's, and then I would focus on internal consistency, which I think, just based on the couple of weeks of school or a week of school, that is really important in terms of using Schoology as a tool consistently. That's a learning management system that we have adopted. We should make sure that we use that and not resort to innovating around, something else. And that goes on to communications. I heard the word Facebook from you, and that's not a good word. So it raises all sorts of privacy issues. We have Schoology, I think we pay for it, and Google Apps for Education. I don't see them utilized to their fullest potential. Communications, you can reach all the students through Schoology. There's no need to post it on Facebook. That'll give parents a way to block Facebook or Twitter or something at home. Schoology is a tool that's underutilized and you're paying for it. So to me it makes no sense to not use what you have and then innovate on that platform. And I've sent emails over summer to Schoology and get the APIs to do more stuff. So in fact, if you get all the data, that Ken talked about and others have talked about and you've talked about, you can do it once, spend 3 months, then you have the script to get the data, and then you can do it continuously and monitor. It's pretty much no effort. So rather than going through papers, I think we should use the tools, use the learning management, the Schoology analytics, and get the data, write the programs to get the data automatically once, and then monitor it. Just like stock codes, you can monitor them. And it goes to the commitment. Again, if you use Schoology and look at the analytics, you can see how some use Schoology the right way, some use it as a link to their own websites, some use the calendars and post the tests, some direct you to some other page where they have a calendar in a PDF file with all the stuff. We need we need to educate the staff. You should really talk to the staff, get their input, and get everyone to commit to a system, whether Schoology or something extended, and then whether they agree or disagree.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Subramanian. Catherine Crystal Foster, our last card.
Good evening, and I wanted to add my voice of welcome to you. We're delighted that you're here, and I was really pleased to hear everything that I heard tonight, and very pleased to see what I saw in that report. I was very appreciative of the ambition in it, the clarity, and the focus on evaluation. I just have one brief question. I was intrigued by the references to the 360s of leadership, and I just wanted to know if that extends to principals, and whether or not that does, and to what extent any kind of evaluative work of programs that are happening at the school site level would be integrated with any kind of 360 reviews of principals.
So right now it does not. We thought we would work on it at our upper leadership team, and now the principals will have a chance to evaluate us, and we'll see how they respond, and of course they could certainly volunteer to do so, but we'll require it at the upper level this year and see what we learn from that first.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ms. Foster. Okay, I am looking to our student reps. So we have 5 goals. I think let me give you each the mic to cover any questions you may have on the 5 goals, and take your time. If you think of something later, I'll be sure to look back and see if you have other thoughts. Do I have a volunteer to start?
Okay, some of mine, I am not quite as well educated on all these goals and all our lovely acronyms and things that we have done. We'll try to learn more, but a lot of this is based around data, and how we collect data is also very important. And I think they referenced the strategic plan survey a couple times. I recall correctly, that took a class period away, was about 45 minutes to an hour, and about 100 questions. And I'll be honest, I didn't answer question 99 honestly because it took me an hour. And I think there is something to be said about looking at how we collect data and maybe doing things more frequently with students, shorter surveys, manageable things, put them on Schoology. We all have to use it. That would be, I think, a very easy way to improve the data you are collecting. Let's see. Just back to data collection. Gun this year, it's our WASC year, and we have a focus group. Part of our whole thing is 100 students are participating in our WASC evaluation.
Wow.
And I think we have 100 students sitting in a room working on a lot of these goals, and if we can extend that to a district-wide thing, students are willing to participate if you go to them and maybe get more voices heard than mine and Carolyn's up here through that, and a little bit less number-based data, but kind of experiences, wholesome data. Okay. Social emotional curriculum, I know that came up. I know when I was at Barron Park, 2nd grade, they started the bullying program when I was in 3rd grade, and that was wonderful. It actually changed the school a lot, and I thought I'd put that out there, so that I felt the difference within a year. Kids change quickly, I guess. Okay. Back to evaluations, actually. Being that students don't have a way to evaluate our administrators. The parents do, but the students do not. And talking about 360 evaluation, someone mentioned evaluating principals, but just the idea that you can't file, unless it's an official complaint, you can't get feedback back to an administrator about how they've dealt with the situation, positive or negative. And I think that would be a very doable addition to some of these measurables and deliverables. Oh, what was the other one? Consistency within curriculum. Yay. So I think between schools, someone said, between, I think any course with this, innovation is important, of course. You want teachers to have some autonomy. My mom's a teacher. I know she would hate if someone told her what to say. But at the same time, I'm sending off a transcript in October, and if a kid in a different class only had to turn in worksheets, and I worked so hard for that B, and he got an A by doing nothing, it says the same thing next to it. And the difference between his A and my B doesn't show up. It's one letter. And that's really important to students because, a lot of our district is college bound, and we want innovation and we want change, but we really need those grades, and we need it to be something that's consistent. So that's a big thing, and I think I'm going to do a shout out to our math department at Gunn in terms of consistency within department. I'm in AB Calculus. I have been in Gunn Math all the way up. They help you from one class to the next. There's no gap between them. They work with determined math teachers because a good part of Gunn comes from Terman, and so it is a clear step up. Talking about connecting the two schools. It's no break. Everything same format, same class between the teachers. They've done a wonderful job for that. Look to them for an example. Everything else, well, all of it looks very good, but those were my quick little comments.
Good. Thank you. Thank you, Rose, very much. Very, very insightful. Carolyn?
Adding on to what Rose said earlier about students evaluating teachers, I do think that is a large problem because I know at Pally some of the times, like at the end of the semesters, the teachers will give out surveys and be like, oh, what did you like, what did you not like in our class? But I think a lot of times the teachers will personalize those, and you don't really get to give them the feedback or critique that you really want to, and I feel like those often get ignored because I feel as if it's always the same teachers that I'm always hearing complaints about year after year, so I don't think the surveys or whatever the teachers are claiming or doing just are effective. Yeah, and I also, I do think all of the goals are very good, and I also think the second goal with equality and fairness in curriculum, like Rose said, it is a big problem how the classes are taught different levels. Like for example, in my physics class right now, I'm in honors physics. Our class hasn't gotten our textbooks yet or actually started learning anything yet, and the other class is like halfway through their next unit, so that's kind of frustrating. And yeah, I think that's a large problem that should be given lots of time and attention to.
Okay.
Thanks, Carolyn.
Thank you, Carolyn. Very helpful. So, Mr. Tom, let's start. We're going to feel free to rest on your time a while, because go ahead and go through all 5, so you can get your clarification questions and comments done, and then we'll move down.
Okay. Wow, I mean, the time we spend on this in our retreat and tonight is the most important time we spend as a board, because this touches our district more broadly and deeply than anything else we do during the year. And I'm so impressed by the work you've done, Dr. McGee, along with your staff, and the comments from our student board members as well as the public. It's just, this is very inspiring, so I appreciate it. So my comments on this, so start with just broadly, I really do like the grouping of actions under a more manageable number of big picture goals, and and it's not that the goals are just so big that they say nothing. They have enough specificity to them that go beyond the very, very broad pillars of the strategic plan, so I like that. I also think that the measures and the deliverables provide an appropriate level of granularity, because I think it's easy for us to want to do deep dives too deep, and I think we want to sort of, at some point you and your staff have to work at that level, but this isn't the right place for that.
Right.
And so I do like that. And when I look at these as a total, much as what I've heard from others say, I do believe these will move our district forward in significant ways. So that's positive. What I find is that each goal is unique, yet they link together in a network that really does support each other in terms of the goals. As was brought up many times, Goal 2 is one that I thought was one of our most thoughtful discussions at the retreat, and I like the way it's evolved with a lot of good input, particularly from President Mitchell. And I really do like how it talks about emphasizing consistent quality and quality and fairness between teachers and schools, while affording local innovation. But then what's more important too is that it couples that with systems for propagating successes, because it's not enough to achieve improvement in one or a few classrooms. The real power comes from taking that impact beyond 1 or 2 classrooms. So I'm glad that that's it's something I know we've talked about as a board, and it requires effort to do that. It doesn't just happen by itself. So I'm glad it's as explicit as it is. One area, so I guess you covered a lot of the questions I had before, which I had asked of you. So I appreciate the specificity you provided on some of these measures and deliverables, so that they're at least they're more understandable to me. One area that I'm thinking about that could change in a broad sense is that the strategic plan area B, which is personal development and support, to me that's about fostering the culture and environment that enables the learning we're really striving for. And so it remains part of our strategic plan. It remains something that we're putting significant efforts towards. Yet I don't believe that work and effort is reflected here. And so I'm just wondering whether it would make sense to add a measure or deliverable that encompasses some of that. It could be our continued new work in areas such as the Safe and Welcoming Schools Initiative, developmental assets, bullying policy, homework policy. Those are all things that are continuing, yet we are pushing them forward, doing new things within those. And I believe when I saw the work plan at the end of last year, there were also some new efforts to support students' social emotional health. I'm not looking for a massive change, but just something to recognize that.
Okay.
If that would make sense.
Good. Thank you.
Let's see. And I mean, I do think there are areas where it could go. I mean, Goal 4 really refers to the entire strategic plan. And Goal 1, it really does touches on more than just academics, because it also talks about things like hard work, active engagement, and perseverance for every student. And those are important and are reflected there.
And there's, it is important. I mean, that's the reason those two are grouped together in our strategic plan logo up there. So, great. We'll consider that with the staff, and I appreciate the suggestion. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tom. Ms. Townsend.
Well, we're on prime time, aren't
Yes,
we?
we
Here
are.
we are. We're moving ahead. This is great. You know, for me, first of all, this is a lot of work, as Mr. Tom says, reflect many hours, several days, years, actually,
Yeah.
a bunch of this work. And to me, actually, every plan is the stories and the devils are in the details.
Right.
And so for me, everything looks great, but there's some things I would like to acknowledge and see what we can do something about. I really believe in assessment, and I have to say that the CSTs over my 10 years on the board have been very helpful. I've found them to be a meaningful and a non-threatening assessment tool by which teachers could evaluate from year to year how the kids were doing. We're losing that, and I think that's a real problem. So I, for one, would really like to see what the real measures are that we're going to be using to evaluate. As someone said recently, that 2017 won't be, Smarter Balance really won't be ready to go till 2017. That's 3 more years. So what are we going to do in the meantime? And so, I don't know if Dr. Young has this set of tools, and we don't have to go through them tonight, but it is something that I really want to look at, because I see it as a huge issue, and I frankly find it a huge issue for many districts. But if we can't do something. So I'm glad to see that we're using ERB, that we've used it over time, it's standardized national. I don't want to lose those things that we have used to date. So I want some assurances around this that, yes, we can all say we're great for assessment, but if we don't have any tools, what good is it? So this is a transition. What are we going to do? And I don't need the answer tonight, but I do need some heavy thinking about how we're going to look at how our kids are doing, and in those transitions from elementary to middle school, what are we going to? Are we going to look at the ERBs? Are we going to look at what math assessments? One question that came up in particular was that we have had a commitment to continue algebra in the 8th grade, but I don't see an assessment around that as well. The Common Core diminished that. That certainly wasn't the intent of our district to do that. In fact, for the most part, it was accepted, and our kids were doing very well in it. Where is the assessment tool? What are we going to be using to evaluate that? So that's a very, it's a detail, but I need that to be a evaluator as a policymaker to see what we're going to do with that. I'm intrigued with how innovation occurs. And on our number 2, we're talking about fairness in assessment curriculum while affording individual schools autonomy to design. I don't think it's about schools. I think it's about individuals innovate.
Some of it does, right?
And parents innovate, maybe through a district level, through a political level, not through a school. So I'm not picking bones about the word. I'm just saying maybe this needs to be expanded a little bit about how does innovation actually occur. I mean, the biggest innovation truly, I think, in my time on the board has been the immersion program. That didn't come from a school. It came from a parent group who then worked with the district and with individual leaders. So where is that in the plan? How do we allow for that? When, and we've had conversations in the past, when does innovation happen? For example, on our surveys, parent surveys about what do they want to see in our district, like number 1 on top was world languages for elementary school kids. it kind of got buried. We've never had that full discussion. When do we have that discussion? So my question is, where in number 2 do we actually talk about innovation?
Right.
And it's not tonight, but I think by saying it occurs, and I know what you're dealing with here, because there's the struggle about district plan versus school plan. And autonomy. So that's kind of an issue that we continue to deal with. But if we're really going to talk about innovation, I think we need to go one step further and say, okay, how does innovation work, and how are we going to allow for it without there being big political battles? Or maybe that's how life is, and innovation is about political battles. Maybe that's true. But that's my
No,
question.
I understand what you're saying, and I think, yeah, we'll take all the, first of all, on the assessment piece, Charles sent me a list of just math assessments and working with Catherine and Barbara, so we'll have, we can be far more specific on that. And we'll do some thinking about where, I mean, you're right, it does, innovation, sometimes it's a group, sometimes it's individual. You know, the idea is that we wanted to get at was the design piece, and maybe we do need to go one step before that, that it is thoughtfully designed with an evaluation piece. But that's what we're thinking about, because
Well, and it's a good thing to be thinking
spark of an
about.
idea, absolutely.
And we do have a policy about new programs and innovations from the community, but there's no part of the calendar, our annual calendar, which looks at other than the survey, and then sometimes that survey again. What happened? I don't know. So we'll think further about that. And then with regard to consistency, we talked about this in our retreat, and my concern about consistency was not even from class to class. It's about I don't even know what categories this goes into, but for example, the hybrid classes. We don't have a district standard for hybrid classes.
Right.
How many minutes should a teacher be with the students? And I do know that there's a broad range of what is meant in a hybrid class to, and this is, I would really like it high up there on the agenda, because I know it's of concern for those who are trying to push the hybrid notion nationally. They're very concerned that maybe our standards aren't where they should be. And if we are one of those cornerstone districts, I think we need to get this right. So I do hope in terms of consistency, and that's kind of innovation, these hybrid classes, that gets up there. Again, detail, I don't know where it fits in here. I'm letting you
That's our
figure
job
it
to
out.
figure that
Okay, great. That's great. And then what we didn't, the other thing I want to throw out there in terms of budgeting is how to scale programs and teaching. If a course is designed for children, that may work, but is there a way to scale, for example, kids that are struggling in some area? Is there a way to scale that up so more kids can get the benefits of some kind of intervention or instruction? And I think, as we shared before in our retreat, LA County or LA Unified or Chicago that we looked at doesn't have the funds to have classes as small as 4. How are we going to scale up? Who are we going to look to in determining how we can perhaps scale those up? So I don't want to stop at the notion that yes, we want to make sure that all of our kids have equal access to opportunity. As you said, equal isn't equivalent. At the same time, we have to be careful that we do have limited resources, and how do we scale up to the extent that we can. So if that's somewhere in there, I had some ideas.
Right, yeah.
Clarify that it doesn't mean, okay, and I do know that some are extremely disabled kids, really there is only one program that works for them. But that is, I think, more unusual than not, and to the extent that we can. And then I did want to appreciate under the teacher staff development recruitment, C3.3 in particular, recruit and hire staff that reflect the diversity of our community. That really hasn't been a high agenda item in the past, and I think that even amongst your senior staff, or even midway staff, I feel a real desire to look at our student population and see the extent to which our teaching staff reflects that. And how we get there, I don't know, but I wanted to appreciate that.
Yeah. And you can get there through recruiting and going out. I mean, it's, there's different ways to get staff. You can let people come to you, but I found in past lives that you really need to be aggressive and go out and recruit and work other districts and just be out and about and make it a priority. But it's if you just sit and wait, it's not gonna come to you. This is not how you build it; they will come. It's you have to go out and find it and talk to people. I mean, I remember calling individual teachers on the phone, asking them to come to the school district, and saying that's what made the decision. Somebody who could have gone a few other places. So we've talked a little about that already internally.
Let's see. Impact of programs. I mean, again, how can I disagree with any of this? It's all lovely. It's all wonderful. To me, it will be in those details, and others may disagree, but I do believe that our plan, our yearly plan every year, I think a parent needs to see that their child is somewhere encompassed in this plan.
Right.
And it's not that we are doing something to the exclusion of everybody else, then we have to find something that because our parents work very hard to be here, and they expect us to do better for their kids, and I think we can always. So, to the extent I can kind of see it here, but that's an overall theme of mine. But tons of hard work, and again, Dr. Young, I appreciate your mentioning that we have many different plans that are coming together. We have the LCAP, we have the Common Core, and all the battles that are on the national level about that. I mean, hopefully what we're doing is taking the best of Common Core. To the extent if there's weaknesses, we're going to evaluate that. I mean, this district already does many things really, really, really well, and Common Core was created to help those struggling districts. To the extent that we can learn something, we're open to it, but we're a high achieving district, and sometimes we have to evaluate whether Common Core is working or not, and let us know. Presumably we can fit everything in here, but I don't want to be wed to whatever Common Core can mean 10 million things to 10 million people. It's, again, one of those slogans. I ask our high school students, do you know what's in the Common Core? I mean, what does that mean? God knows, right? Yeah, some.
I know a bit more than others.
Because your mother's sitting there dealing with it. Yeah, so again, it's one of those, in education we use all of these acronyms or logos that supposedly mean something, but you know what happens? It's obfuscation, and we have to be very careful about that. So those are my comments. Thank you for all taking all this time.
Clarify, so I appreciate that. Yeah,
okay.
That's helpful.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The work so far has been great. The board retreat was fun. What a great opportunity to talk about things at the goals level.
Right.
I really appreciated that. I can't believe the incredibly fast turnaround that happened from our comments to putting everything together. I think you mentioned in introducing new people that some of them have been able to hit the ground running. I think you have hit the ground running. Your experience will serve this district so well. It's been a relatively seamless transition. I have to knock on wood now for saying that. I think you really embody the culture of learning, the lifelong learner. You've been learning from us. We've been learning from you, and I appreciate that very much. I think that sets the tone for everybody here. And I know we all continually learn things from each other and from the students and from the work that we do. So the impact I can see is great. Right. And it's inspiring, as Mr. Tom said, to have time to talk about the big picture vision of where we're going, and this high level setting of the tone. I really appreciate that. Right. So thank you. My questions, and I brought some of this up at the retreat, and we talked about it a little bit, is I know we're setting the sort of what or why, and then the staff is doing the how. I'm concerned sometimes that the staff goes off and puts together a fully fleshed 16 months of work and then comes to present without having check-ins with the board in terms of revising, getting input, feedback. I know it's a messy process because you're in the middle of things, maybe you haven't thought through everything. Well, we haven't either, but I think being able to check in with us regularly before submitting polished presentations is something I'd like to see.
That's a great point.
For sure. And I think we talked about that in the retreat as well, but I wanted to bring that up in terms of opportunities to provide input and direction and particularly feedback, so that we're all on the same page when we come to the finished product. I share Ms. Townsend's concerns about the assessments and how we're placing students in different levels currently when we don't have the same assessments that we've been using. Particularly, and I'm sure we'll be talking a lot about this, as we look at consistency and high quality and fairness across the curriculum. I know that the staff has relied a lot on the numbers we've had in Cruncher. Is that the system? Yeah, or one of those systems that, is that it? Yeah, that takes the test scores and sort of helps place students. So I'm interested to hear more about how we're assessing during this transition period as well. I really appreciate the focused goals on communication and transparency. The website revision is fabulous. I'm so looking forward to that. We have a lot of great information on there, and it's very hard to find. So, thank you, thank you, thank you. I noticed that the website is kind of under a lot of different categories, so I don't know if they should all be combined under, you know, communications or not. It doesn't matter to me, but when I was reading it, I thought, oh, are we going back to that?
That's a good point.
Again, so I don't know how you want to organize it in terms of focus goal area or target area or how it combines to the strategic plan, but there are some things that go together, maybe.
That's a good point.
Those are real specifics that certainly we can talk about offline. But the idea of creating communication tool that works for us and that can help assuage parental concerns, answer parent questions, a focused area where we can look at and say, is this the message we want to get out to the community? There's a great place to do that. So under your communications plan, I think it's like the very last thing, E under 5, design, development, and delivery of a proactive communications plan incorporating multiple media and messengers. That's a big goal. That's like a goal in itself.
That's why we have Tabitha.
Yeah. Yay, Tabitha, you need to clone yourself now. So I don't know if there's a one-year version of that plan. You know, that seems like a goal in itself in terms of that. I already have seen how visible you're going to be on the campuses, and I appreciate that. I think, you know, this is sort of my second full year in the district, but last year I went to my liaison schools teacher brown bag lunch or a parent coffee, and I said, you know, I'm sort of your board liaison. You can talk to any of us, but I'm sort of assigned to this school. And they said, oh, we have an assigned board member. I think a lot of people don't know that there's this board liaison role, and I know that we all like to be at a lot of different events, which is great. But knowing that we are also your emissaries, the district's emissaries, we're the elected officials that represent the community. I think it would be nice to have a place on the website where people could find out who they can talk to if they have a question. And so sort of clarification on that board liaison role and how that fits into the communications plan.
Great idea.
John Toomey always said, they're all my schools, so.
Yes.
Former board member who didn't believe in liaisons, but it's funny, history is interesting.
Yeah. I wish I could get to all the schools, but I have lots of limits on my time. So I think, let's see, those were the big ones that I had. Oh, I had just a question. Under the first goal, you talk about, I think it's in B, establishment of baseline data from the existing strategic plan survey. Don't we have that? Hasn't that all, haven't we already seen sort of the baseline? And actually this last year was the first year comparison to that baseline. So I don't know if you're creating a new baseline, and that could just be a detail.
I don't really want to create a new one.
No.
We have one. Yeah, I wasn't aware of
Okay. Okay.
We do need to add a few questions too, I think. And
Sure.
I'm really mindful of Rosa's comment. I'm thinking, well, there's better ways to do that. Yeah. That's,
Yeah. I also appreciate the looking at the work that we do at the board level and evaluating the extent to which that is being transmitted to the schools. I think that is a really important point in your second goal, and I think some of our members of the public brought it up too. You know, we've done so much work on the bullying policy and so much work on the homework policy, and I really appreciate the look, evaluating the extent to which all these policies that we're talking about at this level are actually implemented and evaluated.
Right.
As you say, with fidelity. So, so that'll be great to see as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, Dr. McGee, I have to say one thing I really have appreciated about this board meeting, and I think that this is sort of natural for you, so I don't think you had to do a lot of work to make this happen, but the fact that you teed up the board meeting basically with your philosophy for how we should be looking at our goals, set up this whole discussion, this whole agenda item. And I know you know that I love the slide with the kids excited about learning, and they weren't kindergartners. You know, that could be my favorite slide for the night.
Right.
Because my dream is that, you know, you come to school every day because you're excited. And you leave school every day because you did something great. And when you graduate and go to college, it's because you're excited about learning new stuff. And when you graduate from college and you start your job, you're excited about going out into the world and making a difference. And I think it's our responsibility to make you that kind of person. And we can't do that unless we all believe that that's our job.
That's right.
So to me, that's, without even this whole report, if we said that's the only thing we were going to focus on, I would be thrilled and delighted. I have to say that when you came in and we first started talking, and I want to share this with the community because they weren't at the board offsite with the superintendent, but we started out with some very detailed strategic plan goals, you know, the thing you couldn't read up on the slide because it was too small. And you were willing to go back and look at it from a different perspective. And you're willing to make a change on the fly, basically, and say, you know what, we need to have goals that are big that say the what are we trying to do, and then we can talk about the how afterwards. So, and you know, we felt like, oh my gosh, there's like 11, 12 goals. It's hard to tell what we're doing. Then we have the LCAP, and we have the strategic plan, and we have the SPSAs, and we have all these things. And we need some sort of funnel that pulls them together, so we're just, everybody's looking at a few things. So if I asked, Principal Ofak, who's sitting in the back of the room, and I'm picking on her because she's the only principal sitting in the back of the room. She actually can remember and count on one hand what our goals are, because if they're 12 or 13, it's too much. So to me, this is a big step forward to be able to do that. Say, we're going to do 5 things this year. There's a lot of stuff underneath, but everybody has different parts of that stuff underneath. I also appreciate that you said this is a draft.
It is.
That we need to work together to continually revise this. And your first day of work, although you did some work before that, but your first official being here every day was the beginning of August, so it hasn't even been a month yet. And so if you had brought us a cut and dry thing and said we're all marching forward, it would mean we weren't really talking. So, and then we weren't listening to community input, and we weren't listening to student input. So that's really important to me. So then there's a couple of things I'd like to see as we go from draft to, the thing that we're all holding hands and marching forward with. I'd like to know what the goalposts are. So these are categories, but I'd like to know, because I think the people that are doing the work need to know what we expect at the end of the year and how close or far away they are from it, so that they can make trade-off decisions with their time and their resources. And it also helps the community. When we talk about communication, it helps the community understand whether we're close to doing what we said we were going to do, or whether we're far away. And that way, if we do what we said we were going to do, we can all celebrate and be excited. I've seen in the past, and I've seen in other organizations, that if you're not clear about that, some people, usually it's the people that did the work, feel like they killed it. And then other people didn't understand that's what they were going to do. And they're not excited. And there's nothing more demoralizing than coming in with what you thought was fabulous and not having the rest of the group excited about that. So since this is a draft, I didn't expect this here, but I'd like to see this as we move forward. And then since we are the policy folks here, and we may be in a position to make investment decisions during the year, and certainly your principals are going to have to make investment decisions, it would be good to understand where you think the investments are going to have to go for each of these things in order for us to be successful. And what the scale of those investments, I don't mean necessarily down to we're going to spend $100,000 here and $50 here, but sort of the scale of where our emphasis is going to be. I agree with Ms. Townsend that every parent needs to be able to look at this plan and say, I see my child in here. And sometimes when you emphasize one thing in a plan, everybody runs to that side of the boat because everybody wants to do what they're supposed to do. And that's great, but we need to make sure then that everyone is represented so we don't have some kids missed. And then my last thing is I love this focus on evaluation. I think it's been very hard. It's been easy for us to try things, and it's been very hard for us to stop things. So there needs to be some thought when you're putting the evaluation program together. What are we going to do with those evaluations? Is it so that we can do whatever program it is better? Is it so we can decide to stop some programs and invest in other programs because we don't have unlimited funds? And if we want to be able to stop some programs, how are we going to come to that decision? Because that's probably the most painful thing for anybody in education, is to stop doing something when you think, well, if I just tweaked it this little bit, it would be better and then it'll be fine. So sometimes fine is okay, but we could take that money and invest it in something else and it could be great.
For more people,
For more people, So, we need to be able to look at that and be honest with each other and make those decisions. And so the more systematic it is, the less personal it feels. And then, going back to the investment thing, we're talking a lot about assuring that innovative practices happen. But a lot of times you have to invest to make that happen.
Yes, you do. Right.
And, I'll give you one example. We let some teachers take time where they weren't teaching to do the out-of-the-box project over the last 2 years. And as a result, things like the hybrid classes came out. But it was a dedicated effort. We had to say, okay, because there are ways innovation can happen organically, but if you really want innovation in specific areas, for example, if we really want global citizens to be developed, then we need to focus on innovation to make that happen. Or if we really want scientists to come out of PAUSD, we really need to focus on innovation to make that happen. So this is later on. This is draft one, so I think this is fabulous.
Okay, good. Well,
Thank
thanks
you.
for the ideas. I appreciate it.
Okay, let me underscore a few things I've heard from others, and then add one, I think. First, I agree, and I'm hearing a lot of comment around the fidelity with which this brings forward the 2 days of discussion we had, as well as past work and ongoing goals. Hearing a lot of emphasis on evaluation and kind of the fairness and quality issues. I wanted to agree with Mr. Tom's point around how helpful I think it would be to add a measurable, which I know we have, to this document on the social emotional health. I want to underscore Ms. Townsend's point about how helpful it would be to consider clarifying some measurables in Goal 1, as Ms. Emberling also pointed out, in that we are in this transition from the CSTs. And again, I think staff has done a lot of thinking on that. It would be helpful to have it noted in this. I want to second Ms. Emberling's point about that the value of an iterative process. I think we talked about it in the past as these epic end-of-year recommendations, when the iterative process is really valuable, and even
It's
somewhat
essential, yeah.
in Rose's comments as well about it also may relate well to inputs and feedback when you have a 100-question survey versus multiple smaller bites at the apple. And Ms. Baton-Caswell, I thought the the goalposts for June, again, are also helpful in clarifying what we're trying to do. It avoids confusion, disappointment, heartbreak even. Often it's just fair, I think, to try to be clear, knowing that this is a work in progress and it should be all in pencil to some degree. And I don't know if I'm extending your point or reiterating it, but I think Ms. Baton-Caswell also made a point about what I wrote down anyway is the relationship to budget development, which will come ever so quickly as we start our first interim in November. Is what our as staff is reflecting and looking at these initiatives and progress and goals. How are we going to weave it into our budget development process, which really begins before November for next year. So really good points. The one thing, and I don't want to change anything here. I think it's, we were all impressed with, as Ms. Baton-Caswell said, your ability to kind of thread these ideas together in, or the initial, the specific actions and activities into larger integrated goals. It was quite a talent and one that we appreciated. And you can see, I think, we're really on the same page in the big ways. And as Ms. Baton-Caswell said, kind of the what versus the how, I think is very helpful. So on goal 2, I think we're all hearing a lot of resonance around this issue, whether community members are calling it consistency, whether we're calling it, our students talked about kind of fairness and quality. Both had good examples. I wonder if our larger community of parents, staff, board members, students have a lot of different ideas of what consistency is, and whether we know enough yet about what that is. I mean, I heard 2 stories tonight that illustrated a strong perspective. And I've heard something very different from other community members as well as to what consistency means to them. So I don't have a specific recommendation other than an interest in ensuring that we have asked enough questions of students in particular on what this means and what we're trying to get to. Because I think we've interpreted it in many different ways over the years and have done different things. And we could spend a lot of time and effort attempting to do the right thing. And I don't know if we have all the
It
information.
sounds like we have some forums to get that, whether it's a WASC or whether it's your third period class or, really, to get
Focus
some more
groups or
ideas.
something, yeah.
Can I ask a question about that? The more I've sat here and you've resonated with me, that what's consistent and what's fair, I would like to spend time on that because it was something that we talked about in the retreat. And for example, Ms. Baton Caswell is very excited when she sees these groups working together. And that's where the fun is. Some teachers like group and projects, some teachers don't. It might be the same class. One physics class might really have the project, one may not. So it is interesting where, how important is consistency when there's different teaching styles and frankly different kids and parents who want different things for their students. So I know project-based learning is just exciting, isn't it? It's great. How do you bring that up to the same level? So I think these are very hard questions. But again, too, back to the budget, if we want exciting, good things, if we want project-based learning, well, you've got to have money to go there. Well, then consistency, it all wraps, doesn't it? It's not easy.
I just want to add something. I really appreciated, Rose, what you had to say, because we want our kids to be going to school and excited about what they're doing. We also want them to feel like the work they're doing is going to be fair. And if it feels like the work that you are doing in class and you're working really hard and you have that teacher that you know is life-changing, but boy, is she tough, and you know it'll be good for you afterwards, and then you look at your neighbor next door and they're like, riding their skateboard in the street, and you have a major paper due, and you're both in the same class, so how is that possible? Well, she has a different teacher than you have. That's very demoralizing. And when we talk about student stress, I think things like that feed into student stress more than anything else. It's very hard to be resilient when things like that are going on. So I think it's important for us to take this seriously and think about what we can do.
The other thing, which I guess I thought I'd speak a little bit about, my mom being a teacher, so kind of representing a bit of teachers here, but she's a physics teacher. The physics all share the same prep area, and that's where they collaborate. The physics classes are very, very similar. They use the same materials, same worksheets. They're about the same. I was in the other teacher's class last year, so. But he did more labs. He's a bit more jokey. She does more demos, different kind of styles, and there is room for that. But part of that is because they have the time and the space to collaborate. And I think that is really big. And I know, at least at Gunn, I don't know about Pally, but just our campus, half our English history department's, a 10-minute walk away. And do they really have the room to work together? I see that as a pretty easy change. And within the elementary schools, if there was a time when all the 5th grade teachers could work together, I think that would give space for people to really get an equal consistent, it just, allow for different styles, but still have the same kind of baseline expectations of what you get when you leave that class. So.
Great addition. So I think my last comment on this great issue around this, fairness, quality, consistency. I think the missing value is choice, because I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that students don't want a definition of consistency that reduces choices.
Right.
So it's, again, as Ms. Townsend said, it's a complex thing, and I just have a sense we need to learn more about that before we aim our
I like that word in there.
our resources.
Choice in the terms of different lanes or between the teachers, because it's really hard to switch classes.
Oh, yeah.
Once you get a teacher.
Yeah.
And it's easy to switch lanes. If you say, I want to go down, they'll switch you out immediately. And that's where you get the teacher picking based on lanes, which is why we have a line out the door of the guidance department trying to switch classes. But is
Whole nother
it within the
interesting
lanes or?
I think my concept was at a very general level about the passion for which students and parents and staff, I think, value our rich curricular choices, which I think is complementary to your points. Anyway, so have we provided some useful feedback? And
I had one
Ms.
more.
Sure.
I just wanted to say briefly in support of a couple
If you
things I heard,
started,
just to
right.
expand a little bit. Well, I really support what you said about surveys, because I know from personally taking surveys, especially online surveys, I mean, there's nothing worse than going through page after page down the thing, click off all these things, and you can say next, and it says 1%.
Yeah, I was just gonna
Oh,
say.
forget it, I'm done. And so, I mean, I think that's the worst. So, you know, I love it when it says 100% done. you know, but and we got to find something that works for parents as well as for the kids, because it's just, and it's hard because well, like Palo Alto, you know, we have this unquenchable thirst for knowing more, and so we just want to ask more, and then it just it
Which
gets
gets
longer
used
and longer.
less,
Yeah, and it gets less useful too. Then the other thing I wanted to talk about was just express support for is what Ms. Bain-Castle said about how hard it is to stop doing a program. And it really struck me when she talked about the emotional aspect of it, because I think that's a really important part of that. Not because it is personal, because there's the staff member who's working on it is personally invested in it, because we're talking about trying to help students, help children. It's really hard. I mean, you know, a simple example is, you know, it's much more emotionally difficult to sell a stock than to buy a stock. And you're talking about stock, and you're just talking about stock. And, you know, but now we're talking about something that, you know, we are doing because we think it's helping kids. And so, you know, that I think that does increase the difficulty of making that decision dramatically.
Thank you. Any other?
I just want to, yes, I like choice. Dr. McGee, I just wanted to jump into that, and you put it down there. Good, okay, because it is true. It's one of the richest parts of our whole district core is the many choices that we have, and we don't want to lose sight of that. So that's my last one.
And Carolyn or Rose, any last thoughts before we move on?
I guess maybe a bit of a question. I wasn't quite sure, but for 3, like, we kind of are talking, I believe, about addressing all students, and, you know, some that are maybe underachieving, but how are we identifying those kids? That's just kind of as a student, I tend not to know how we identify the underachieving kids. Is there an effective way of identifying people from all ages? That's something we've addressed.
I don't know if it's underachieving versus, well, we have a sense of who has more ample opportunities for learning than others. I mean, whether it's free and reduced lunch, whether it's, you know, frankly, a lot of it's a teacher's call. I mean, the teachers seem to know this better than anyone. And early on, I mean, in kindergarten and first grade. So, you know,
But it may be deeper than that. I mean, because one of the things at the high schools is that if a student gets a D or an F, it doesn't matter who they are. They're called out and we intervene. And so it's, in some ways, I would prefer the language to say at-risk student, whoever that is. That's the better term, because we identify, truly, we don't just Yeah,
That's a good thought,
it's based on outcome, and if people are struggling getting Ds or Fs or something else, then we intervene. So I think that's the better term, and so your question really, thank you, because we've talked about this before, and I think we had different language before, so.
And also, Rose, we have had metrics in the past that we've looked at that seem to correlate closely with kids that struggle later on. So, for example, we don't use the CST anymore, but it was true that kids that were below proficient on the CST were very likely to struggle later on and not achieve the goals that we had later on in school. So we will have to find some other measures like that with our new assessments. But it's not just a division on that kid doesn't look like he's paying attention in class, and it's not just a division on, you're on free and reduced lunch, so you need more help. There are a lot of metrics that are based on testing and things that we look at, and we try to cross-tabulate them and triangulate.
Well, maybe I won't perseverate on this, which is at the elementary level, for instance, we have a number of assessments that we give kids throughout the course of the year, starting in kindergarten, around reading and mathematics, and so we are pretty good at identifying where kids are deficient and where they need additional help, and then we intervene pretty systematically. And what Ms. Caswell was talking about, that real powerful statistic that if kids are not reading at grade level by third grade, they're going to have problems moving forward. Not problems that we can't help with, but it's really a good indicator of them maybe needing more help as they go forward. So, but we have a lot of tools that we can use early on.
Good. Okay. I think Dr. McGee has some wrap-up things before we move on.
Well, thanks. And, this was a collaborative effort with you, with our leadership team, our cabinet, and it will be going forward as well. So we appreciate, I'll speak for them, that we really appreciate your thoughts and ideas that made me think of some things in a new way, how we can improve this. Turn around in 2 weeks may be a challenge. We will do our best. We got a lot of good ideas and a lot of information, but I think we're all headed in the right direction, and thank you for your ideas, and girls, thank you for yours. You're welcome to stay or go, but I really wanted you to stay for this part. We did a little briefing before this, and your input was valuable as a community. So we will come back with an improved product, and based on what we heard tonight. So thank you for your time and energy, and onward we go. We'll get to it. All right.
Thank you.
And thank you for the staff work, everyone. Okay. Just a time check. We're about 50 minutes behind, but I think very well spent.
1-5 or 5-0?
5-0.
Oh, okay. All right.
Luckily, it's the most important item of the year. So
Yes, it is. It is.
Teacher presentation.
And it's the biggest item on this.
It is the biggest, and
right,
we should be.
accelerate now.
Yep, exactly. Okay, so our next item is a routine item, and it is documentation to authorize signatures, particularly Dr. McGee's as superintendent. And Dr. McGee, do you have anything to tee this up with? Or should
No,
we go
this
to
is,
Matt?
this needs to be done just for legal purposes, really, and so we're just looking to vote on it as soon as possible the next meeting. Kathy, anything you wanted to add?
No?
Would you like a motion?
And I think we're suggesting we waive the two-meeting rule.
Right.
In as much as there are actions that need to be taken. So I would first like to entertain a motion to waive the two-meeting rule.
So moved. You move. I'll second.
Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, we have approved the waiver of the two-meeting rule, and I would entertain a motion to take action on the recommendation.
So moved.
Thank you both. Good night.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, the action is approved on the resolution unanimously. And that moves us to discussion, the authorization to issue addendum number 18 to Gelfand Partners Architects for additional services at Duveneck Elementary School. Dr. McGee.
Right, and this is an item which really is no net cost to us, so Bob will enlighten us on how this works.
Well, that's it. Essentially, there was a redesign needed for the elevator in the two-story building. we are back charging the contractor for this this work that they need to redo. The architect needs to do the design, and the architect has already completed the design, and so therefore we're going to save $5,900 on the on the contractor's work, and we are going to pay that money to the architect. Why can't the contractor pay the architect directly? Answer: because they have no contractual relationship with the architect. We're the only one that have these contractual relationships, and so that's it.
And are there any questions from the board? Can this come back on consent, Dr. Golton?
Yes.
All right, is that
That'd be
okay
great.
with the
That's
board?
great.
All
Thank
right,
you.
let's bring that back on consent. Thank you, Dr. Golton. Next item is a discussion item, authorization to solicit bids for the replacement of traffic signal at Miranda Rastradero at Gunn High School.
Right, thank you. And this is these projects that involve multiple jurisdictions and has created some problems. And Dr. Golton, if you can explain those and how we intend to resolve it. So I think this is a good solution.
Yeah, will do. We awarded a contract to Grade Tech for $1.2 million for this work on the parking and drop-off area at Gunn High School. And you saw pictures earlier, and in fact, here's some pictures now again. The signal, there was really an exhaustive process. The county and the city were very, very careful, and as a result, there was a change made to the placement of the traffic signal. So what we're doing, this contractor, Grade Tech, is essentially finished. However, we don't have the traffic signal, and it's going to take us a month and a half to get that traffic signal. And so therefore, the plan is to release the contractor and to capture the money that we would have paid that contractor, which is on the order of about $30,000. However, the signal configuration that the county and the city want is somewhat different, and it has an extremely long pole that will go over a Rastradero for more visibility, and that is going to cost us maybe $100,000 and maybe more. Now, if we were assured it was going to be less than $100,000, remember we have that threshold. So if we were ensured that it would be less than $100,000, we wouldn't be coming to you at all. We'd be letting you know, but we would not bring it to the board for approval. However, the possibility exists it'll be more than $100,000, and so what we're requesting here is authorization to bid, and these bids are either going to come in over or under $100,000, and if they are over $100,000, the board will be asking the board to approve the bid, and you'll see the bid results formally at a board meeting. If it's under $100,000, then we'll simply report to you, and we will put it probably in a weekly, and we'll tell you what the bids were, and so that's where we are. The parking and drop-off is, well, it's a big success. They're in excess of 30 nice prime parking spaces that people that work in the new classroom building, they love those parking spaces. So we have, and incidentally, it relieves demand on other areas of campus. And so the parking is a big success. The drop-off area, Tab, why don't you show that next slide again? And so this is from a Rastradero, but the fact remains the drop-off, that circular drop-off area is good. So we're good, but we need to bid this signal, and then we need to award that contract. And so we're requesting authorization to allow us to bid it.
Thank you, Dr. Golden. Do we have any questions? I'm looking down.
I just have one question. When you say a wider right turn lane and new striping and all that sort of stuff that you said here, is that going to extend the bike lane, kind of the area where bikes can turn as well?
Yeah, let me throw that question to Smith, who's here.
Yes, it softens the corner to make an easier corner. It doesn't cut across the bike lane. It makes all of that flow significantly easier. Little hard to describe. There's a lot going on in that area, and
It's a crazy intersection.
Yeah,
That's
and
why I ask.
You've got a lot of folks that are players at the table in this, so that was one of the reasons that the permitting cycle took so long to get that. But it should greatly improve not only the car traffic, foot traffic, and bicycle traffic.
Is there a lot of bicycle traffic going that route? Have you seen?
There isn't, and we've greatly reduced that. If you remember the project before this, when we put in what they're calling the bridge, it's farther back by the end building. That there's an old right-of-way that goes along there. It used to be a railroad, and the railroad still has some tie to it. Hetch Hetchy's still on there, and there's some city and county things that go through there. We were able to get all those folks to agree to allow us to put in from that back bike path a bridge going through there. So now if you're coming back from like the Barron Park neighborhood, you don't have to come to this corner that's shown here that you used to have to do. You can cut across at the bridge. So it's greatly reduced that. There is some bike traffic, not school traffic. You know, the folks that are going, you know, cross town. You can actually, if you're on your bike, you start here, you can beat me back to my office using those paths over the car. So the community does use those.
Thank you. I appreciate the tremendous amount of coordination this takes with the city and the county and Stanford and the VA, and I mean, it's just
Hetch Hetchy.
It's endless what went into making this. So, thank you for navigating all of that. And that was my question. Thank you.
Well said. Any other questions on this item?
Yeah, I do. So the staff recommends deleting this work from grade tech scope. So does that diminish? There's no repercussions for that, and is it equally then reduced from what we pay them?
Yes, that's right. This deletes that scope, and in addition, it deletes their time in being on the job also, because they'd have to maintain it. So yes, so we save money.
Okay, so, but I guess just being obvious here is that we've changed the scope for the contract, but there's no damages as a result of it to them.
Yeah, no, this is a friendly termination.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Good question. And Dr. Golton, is this okay on consent as well?
Yes, it is.
Okay, and is that okay with the board?
Right, because it's just the authorization to solicit bid anyway, yeah.
Correct. We're not doing an award. We don't know what that amount is.
Okay, great.
Good. Thank you, Dr. Golton. That moves us on to declaration of need, emergency limited assignment, and short-term staffing permits for certificated employees. We have 3 items coming up here from Dr. Bowers on the human resources side, routine items.
Right. Yeah, this is a supply and demand issue. These not enough supply and too much demand, so the state does give us some leeway. Scott?
Yeah, the state requires us to submit to them a declaration of need every year, and in many cases, these are just estimates on what we're going to need. In some cases, we actually know that we have these. Best example is our teacher librarians. All of our teacher librarians are fully credentialed teachers. Unfortunately, the state requires teacher librarians or our library media teachers to hold 2 credentials, a teaching credential, a full teaching credential, and then go back and get a library credential. And so all 6 of these people who were applying for these emergency permits are fully credentialed teachers that are trying to get the library portion of their credential so that they're fully credentialed. There's they have both parts of their credential. That's just an example of what we're doing. Another example would be cloud permits, where we hire out-of-state teachers from Arizona, New York, Florida, Texas, and where they don't require the cross-cultural language and academic development authorization that we do here in California. So we hire them, We get an emergency permit for them for the cloud authorization, and they spend the next year or two taking the coursework or the tests in order to be fully credentialed in the state of California. It's straightforward.
Thank you, Dr. Bowers. Any questions? Board mates? Can this go on consent, Dr. Bowers?
Yes.
Okay, so be it. Next item is the teaching assignments for departmentalized subjects.
That's another item we bring to you each year with folks, and many of them have been teaching in these areas for many years. You see their name year after year. These folks have a teaching credential. They're fully credentialed in one area. They may have taken multiple courses, at least 18 units in other areas during their undergraduate and graduate work that authorize them to teach in other areas if they approve. And this is simply us bringing it forward to you so that the board has taken action that shows CTC of your approval.
Any questions? Ms. Emberling.
So these are staff members that wanted to qualify for new classes, and so they went and did all this coursework?
No, these are staff members who already have the coursework in their undergraduate or graduate programs who are teaching. Oftentimes it's a program that's, take Joshua Bloom to begin with. He's teaching a class on astronomy, which is typically not something you get a teaching credential in here in California. It's usually physics, biology, chemistry, maybe geology. But he has enough background coursework in order to launch astronomy as an elective at the high school. Going back and taking all the coursework or the exams isn't necessary because he has enough fundamental background in order to teach it with the board authorization for this departmental subject specialist.
Great. And then are these new classes that are offered because they have this training?
You know, many of these have been offered for 5, 6, 10 years.
Okay. Great.
And is this okay for consent as well,
Yes.
Dr. Bowers? And is that what the board would like? Thank you. And the last HR item is the renewal of student teaching and intern agreements.
We bring this to you every year so that we can bring on either interns or student teachers from our neighboring preparatory universities and colleges, although in some cases you'll see that we have colleges that are outside of the state. Many times those are Palo Alto residents who have gone off to college, whether it be Teachers College or they're at, where would be a good example, Western Governors University, and they're coming back to do their student teaching in the area. So we have to have agreements with them.
Thank you. Any questions? Consent okay, Dr. Bowers?
Yes.
And board? I see nods. Okay. So 2 more items. The next item is the resolution of support for Assembly Bill 146. This is an initiative that is being supported by California School Board Association, the California Similar Association of Superintendents and Business Officials, 3 different associations. And we discussed this briefly in the spring. This has to do with the kind of the late-breaking, last-inning change in the legislature to limit the local reserves that school districts can maintain. So there's a large swell of support for repealing that initiative or that bill. So I think, Dr. McGee, you have prepared a good summary here. Do you want to?
Sure, just real quickly. Yeah, this has been enlightening, and to say the least, about
Aren't you glad you came to California?
politics. Oh my goodness, it's been a great
Welcome to California.
Yeah, talk about see first to understand. Yeah, I'm still working on that.
Yeah.
But Barbara sent up a meeting with Assemblyman Gordon, who provided some really interesting insight to how this happened. And Ms. Castle and I went to a legislative meeting in the suburban school districts and got a little more insight. But basically, this was put as part of the budget process. So this was not, you know, for the folks out in the viewing audience, the board all knows this, but this was not enacted legislation. It did not go through the real legislative process. Yes, it did because it was part of the budget, but there's really, well, let's face it, they don't have a choice on how to vote for the budget at the 11th hour. And they actually do these things in other states as well. But this really confounded me because given the vagary, shall we say, of California school funding, the fact that things can happen. I mean, look at Napa, and I don't know how the schools were impacted up there, but I imagine there's probably the need to tap some emergency funds now after the quake. That it just does not seem like sound and responsible fiscal policy. In addition, it takes away local control, which seems contrary to the philosophy of the LCAP, the LCFF, and it just doesn't really make good fiscal or policy sense. So legislation was proposed, this AB 146, that would repeal that language that was in the trailer bill of the budget. And as Barb said, we have been asked by many groups to support this. Other districts are considering this month. And I know, Melissa, you're more of an expert in this than I am at this point, but it would seem to me it would be wise to hop on board and take a leadership role, especially for basic aid districts, where we can't rely on the state for any kind of emergency funding. Our policy exists now at 10%. Kathy can fill in why we, well, we all know that is board policy, but, kind of things that we think we might need or something to happen. But, so Kathy, let me turn this maybe over to you for any elaboration, and then I know, Melissa, you're taking the lead at the board discussion.
Thank you, Dr. McGee. So as you mentioned, in the state budget trailer bill, at the very last minute, there is this provision that caps school districts' reserves, and in however you look at it, it's a bad bill. And so now we have this proposed bill to repeal the provision, and again, we're being asked to support, and I think the board should pass the resolution and also send a letter to our local legislators to also support this bill.
Good. And just one other point of clarification. There's what is printed in the packet is the sample template from the California School Board Association, and of course we would insert the
we did insert
the names of the district of our district, and with more detail when this returns. So any questions, comments, starting with you, Ms. Baden-Catherine?
I have two comments, but the first one is I just want to read the whereas that Ms. Mack put in, because I think it's important that our community know that this reserve is established to allow a school district to meet program needs during an economic downturn, to backfill loss of recurring revenue, and to fund one-time non-recurring expenditures such as major textbook adoptions, capital outlay projects, and acquisition of real property and equipment and furniture. Now, if you're a basic aid district, you get your property taxes twice a year, right? Twice a year we get, or a couple times a year. And if you need to spend money in between that, and you have the reserve that they're recommending, you would need to borrow. In a situation where your reserves are that low and you're put in a position to borrow, your borrowing costs would be higher than they are now because your reserves would be so low. So it's sort of like a double whammy here. We have excellent ratings from Moody's and Standards & Poor's, but they will be impacted if the reserves are brought down lower, particularly since we would have to borrow. Isn't this, it's sort of this negative cycle. Because we have to borrow, our ratings would be impacted, which would make our borrowing costs higher, which would mean we'd have to borrow more. So this really, and we're in a pretty good position compared to some other districts in California. I think I heard that there's something like, I can't remember the number, but it's a huge number of districts that are really small. And those districts, they're really in a bind, not just the basic aid ones, but, if something goes wrong, if you're up in Napa County in some little district and you have to quickly fix a hole in the roof and you don't have a reserve for that, you have to borrow. and the rates won't be good when you have to do that in an emergency situation. So our reason for supporting this resolution goes way beyond Palo Alto. This is just bad policy for school districts.
Good. All set.
I don't feel strongly about this.
Yeah, Ms. Emily, do you want to add anything?
Oh, you want to go to me now?
Yeah, Garrison, I'm sorry.
Oh, no worries. So, yeah, I was curious about this and why it happened, as we all were in the 11:30 hour for the budget. And I was trying to look at some of the Democratic opposition to this and this repeal, and also what the California Teachers Association was saying, just to sort of figure out sort of why this was being proposed. Some of the numbers I found that some of the teachers' unions were sending out is that throughout the state, the average reserve hovers around 30%, which we'll talk about in a moment. Some, and to Ms. Baton-Caswell's point, some small elementary districts were keeping reserves of more than 100%, a few over 200%. In fact, according to the numbers, 698, so nearly 700 of our 977 districts in the state of California were keeping reserves higher than 15%. And so this was concerning in terms of, our school boards keeping too much in reserves, and do we need a maximum cap in terms of that? Taxpayers want to see their investment spent in the schools for the kids that are going through it and for the community. And so if this was true, that such a high percentage was being kept in reserve statewide, and so from these numbers we're really low in terms of our 10%, then that would be concerning. Mr. Tom and I sat in the city schools liaison meeting with both of our budget directors, and the city holds, I think it's 15% in their reserves, so we're also low compared to that. So I did some more research and sent off some information through Mr. Gordon, Assemblymember Gordon's office, and Senator Jerry Hill's office, and who then contacted the LAO. And the reality is that it's more around 20% in terms of average throughout the state, but to the point of smaller school districts needing to keep more reserves on hand, that is true. That certainly credit ratings are affected, and the inability to borrow when needed. This repeal bill was rushed through. I don't know if any of you saw the original bill, but it was something on a totally different topic, and everything was crossed out, and then this was sort of added in almost handwriting in terms of trying to send it through as quickly as possible. And right now it's languishing in the Senate Rules Committee and will not be heard by the Senate anytime soon. Probably will not come back, if it does at all, until the new year. So I'm not sure, according to these sources.
Yeah, well, keep going, and I
Thank you.
Let me share on that.
So my thought is, I'm not sure if we need to do this right now in terms of putting together a resolution in support of something that may not move forward. I think a more thoughtful approach to how they're going to move it forward, if it's going to be amended and what it's going to look like, I think it would be more informative to wait until we have more detail in terms of that. It did not go through the legislative process. That was a huge problem. Putting a cap, if everyone is doing what they need to do and presenting it in the context of how much reserves
districts need to keep. I mean, I think the important thing is that districts are having open and transparent conversations about their reserves and their funding priorities and what they're putting it aside for is the more important message here in particular. So those are my comments in terms of this right now.
Thank you. Ms. Townsend?
My sense is this is really troubling to me, and I just appreciate the good homework both of you did. That's really wonderful. I, however, would support it. I think sometimes you need to be even early and vocal in saying, come on, folks, this is just crazy business, and we want you to know that we're watching. So I always appreciate as an elected official when people let me know ahead of time that there's issues out there and send me letters, and I think this is the kind of letter that's appropriate. It's pretty measured in my opinion, having been through the 2003 letter writing campaign. This is to save our basic aid. This is pretty measured. So I don't see a reason not to support it, because I just was pretty stunned and thought this is, and you know what? It's a black eye for personally. I just thought it was a real black eye on government in general to have this move along. So I just want to be a vocal, local elected official who says this is out of whack and you need to correct it. And I appreciate that that it's being held. Steinberg. Yeah, Steinberg. So it doesn't get voted on. But I'd like to see this come back and vote on it as is, and I do find it irresponsible, and I think people should hear it. And despite the comment publicly that the public was overreacting to this reserve policy, I thought, no, it's not. No, it's not overreacting. So I think a message needs to be sent in early, and that's my thoughts about it.
Mr. Tong?
Well, I support this resolution. I think the resolution doesn't speak specifically about AB 146. I mean, I like the way it's written in that it talks about the reserve cap. It's opposed to the reserve cap. And I'm willing to waive the 2-meeting rule to do it tonight so that we can lead on this issue, because I think we need to send this to our local legislators. We need to send it to CSBA and CASBO and AXA so that we just give them some more ammo, because I think all of those groups need to do something about this. I know, I'm on the board of directors for CSBA, and there's been a lot of emails going around between board members and the executive director about what are we going to do about this, because CSBA is still actively negotiating with the different parties to try to figure out a good solution. But push comes to shove, we're going to have to think very carefully about whether we support the rainy day fund ballot measure. I mean, if this is left in there the way it is, and this is like that, to me, that's like a poison pill right in that proposition. And that's a terrible thing. It's a sad thing, because the concept, the notion of a rainy day fund makes a lot of sense to me. And it's just atrocious that they did this. It's completely flawed legislation that was passed in a completely indefensible way. So it appears to be purely political. And it's really sad. I mean, that in a way, all of those things go together. Usually, when it's passed in that way, it is flawed legislation and it's purely political, because that's the only way you can get it done.
That's right.
And I've heard these statements that, well, the way it's written, it'll never realistically trigger and affect school districts. Well, then why do it at all? What was the rush to put in something so stupid?
And $1 going into the property will cause this to happen.
No, CSBA, I mean, you already see it. They're working on putting together lots of materials. They have talking points to try to start to get some sanity into this. One of the board members who's very I think she's an auditor, and she's into a lot of the financial aspects. I mean, she said that, when she looked at some of even the LAO numbers, which differ greatly from the CTA numbers. CTA, they do the how to lie with numbers thing pretty well. And the LAOs comes out a little bit more balanced, but even then, it inflates what the reserve levels really are, because basically the definition of reserves that the LAO is using includes funds that an average person would not think of as reserves.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Unspent money or even designated money that hasn't been spent yet, they're counting that as reserves. And so it makes it seem like these districts are having much higher reserves than they actually are, because she even said, I'll give you this one quote. She said, once she looked at that, she said, "This all makes me feel better, as I know our reserves that are actually available for future spending are nowhere near 20%. And I thought you all must be hoarding cash." So, I think unfortunately, this is a kind of thing where it's easy to be misleading, what counts as reserves and what doesn't. I think our 10% is, I think according to some of these other organizations, they would probably count a lot more in that as far as what our reserve level is. Mm-hmm. So anyway, I just think this is something where we should act as quickly as we can.
Yeah, I agree. We should support this quickly. It is agendized for discussion as opposed to action, so I'd prefer not to waive the 2-meeting rule. And I think getting it to all of the groups that Mr. Tom mentioned in 2 weeks will be adequate and supportive based on the November ballot measure or referendum. Back to Ms. Townsend's point, when things like this happen in the dark of night, it is a black eye to all of us, I think, who serve the public. And there's a lot of misinformation out there that would have been addressed had there been appropriate public hearings and the way that legislation should be turned from sausage into whatever. The number I've heard consistently from Schools for Sound Finance is that the average reserve level throughout California is 10%. And to Mr. Tom's point, I think percentages can create illusions. If you're a very, very small district, you would need to carry a higher percentage just because the sum of money is so small, and you have to have enough to handle a realistic contingency. So it's unfortunate that there are, there's a lot of misinformation going on. That said, I've rarely seen the level of strength in the Education Coalition as I've seen on this issue between school board members and superintendents and business officials. And I was particularly impressed by CSBA President Joe Lucy's comments in a press release last week, and her request for support from school districts to respond in approving resolutions. I think it's important what Mr. Tom says too. This resolution doesn't refer to the Assembly bill. Mm-hmm. It's the underlying issues measured as well. So I would leave it as is. It's what they've requested, and I think it isn't clear the impact it will have. But I think without the voice, we can be certain that nothing will happen. And the closest example of why school districts need more substantial reserves is the period we've just gone through.
Mm-hmm.
And the Great Recession. I mean, we definitely would have cut programs in our district to balance the budget had we not had the level of reserves that we did. We would have had to. And what that creates is a great instability in the program that our students experience. And as Townsend often says, you're only in third grade once. It's really, really important for our district to maintain these levels of reserve. So I will be supporting this. I would recommend we keep it as is. My only question for the board was whether they wanted any reference to AB, but I don't think that's the important
piece. Nothing stops us from writing individually either.
Yeah,
so
I just wanted
plan on doing so.
I did want to share with all of you that at this suburban schools. Calisiste, yeah, California. Jeff Ross did say, look, the likelihood of overturning this before the November ballot measure is very low. But the importance of making it clear that this is not acceptable is really important, because as soon as that ballot measure is over, as soon as November's over, we're going to be talking about new things. And if this suddenly comes out of thin air, like we never said anything about it, and suddenly we jump in November, it's a big question mark. Why didn't you say anything before? So I agree with Mr. Tom and Ms. Townsend and Ms. Mitchell that, certainly this could be written differently, but I think it says what we need to say now, which is this is not good business for school districts.
Mr. Tom?
Yeah, I just have one more thing to add. I mean, so I think it could become one of these things where numbers keep flying out. And even, it was interesting to me that when I did see the CSBA materials, they do refer to the numbers that CTA put out there. And so, for instance, they even use the average of, where is it? They talk about an average of 30% reserves. And that by itself is misleading on two counts. One, as I stated earlier, the definition of reserves used to make that calculation was flawed, and so then that inflates that percentage. The second thing they did was to find the average reserve level for the entire state. What they basically did was they took every district, no matter the size, said used the flawed calculation of percentage, and then added them up and divided by the number of districts.
Oh.
Well, there's many more small districts with large reserves levels. Each one of those counts exactly the same as LAUSD in that average calculation. And so it wasn't like the,
No weighted.
Well, it wasn't.
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
Can I just make
please,
a
yes, of
clarification
course.
on?
Yeah, of course.
So my thought to wait was mostly to see what would happen with this particular bill, but I appreciate you pointing out that it doesn't refer to that bill at all. It's that bill that was just written badly, to handle another bill that was written at the last minute. So, two wrongs not making a right and all of that. I am very much in favor of the idea of this, and I appreciate that it's not, relating particularly to that bill.
Mm-hmm. So, would the board like us to bring it back in the form that it is without any wordsmithing other than the addition of the district details that you've seen in draft form? I will also ask to have the CSBA information, and I think the board policy on the basic aid reserve added to the packet for our action.
Okay.
This was late breaking.
Honestly,
No,
Or not?
I don't know. I
just
think
the-
just our stuff, I think.
Just the policy.
Yeah, because I think there's some, as Mr. Thomas brought up, there's some issues with this, given the numbers that were used and how they were calculated, but our board reserve
This is the
policy is very-
CSBA.
I know.
Yeah, they're quoting CTA
They're
there.
quoting
They're
CTA
quoting
in it.
CTA, which is...
Okay, so we'll bring this back with the board policy,
Great.
with the board basic aid reserve policy, which we just approved, ironically, this year.
Must be consent.
And consent, okay?
Yeah,
Or do
yeah,
you
that's
want-
great.
Okay.
Is that all right? Okay.
Welcome to California finance.
Thank you.
That was
is
pretty
that?
intriguing.
Education finance in
Yeah, nice
particular.
I'm sure you've seen a lot being near Chicago.
Oh, yeah. We have our own way.
You
to
have your own, right.
Speaking of which, okay.
do it. When the camera's running, I'll leave it right there.
Good. Okay, so our last item is the biannual review of the conflict of interest codes. This is based on every other year, the Santa Clara County, every county in the state, reviews and updates the conflict of interest codes. So what we have received are the updates from our last approved bylaw, and there's only one change other than what the county legal office has made, which is to add our chief technology officer to this conflict of interest code. And the process is such that if the board approves the addition that staff is recommending, this will go to the county for final approval and then would return to us once we've received their positive review for board action. And that needs to happen before the end of November. Are there any questions on this?
I just have a process question. This was handled, I think, differently than other board policy things. Or maybe it wasn't. Was this sent through the Board Policy Review Committee?
No.
So I guess my question is, why did we handle this differently than we handle other changes to board policy? And is there some sort of rule that says when we handle things differently?
Well, originally there was, originally there was a September deadline, as you may have seen in the materials. So I think staff's interest was to get it before the board as quickly as possible. These are mandated changes, so I think it was the sense that this is different in the sense that we don't get anything else from CSBA, for example, that has mandated changes to this degree. We don't have a choice to not accept the mandated changes. So what the Board Policy Review Committee would be reviewing is simply the staff recommendation to add the Chief Technology Officer. And then that would have possibly pressed our timeline beyond the deadline that the county requires.
And it doesn't look like there's a change in the board bylaw per se. There's a change in the sort of secondary.
The code?
Yeah, the code, the conflict of interest code. Is that true? I mean, it looks like there's no change to the, I don't know, it's called a BB.
Yes, the board bylaw.
It's different than the BP.
There are no changes to the board bylaw itself, just to the appendices that is coming directly from the Board of County Supervisors.
Right, okay, that's what I thought, so possibly that's another reason.
Okay. I just,
I think what it
are
is,
people comfortable with that?
Par for the course, I do want things to come through BPRC, or whoever is the president should be checked with. I just think a good protocol, because this past year when we started, actually, now we're going to have actual meetings set out for the next 6
scheduled, aren't they?
Yeah,
Yeah.
and Heidi has to look at them. So I think that things will get more regularized this year, and Dr. McGee and I chatted a little bit about that as well, and we has my ideas as well. When we first just sat as two, going through the board policies, it seemed much more casual. So we're trying to formalize things a little bit more, and I appreciate the question, and I think in the future it'd just be good to have it check with the superintendent and whoever chairs the committee so that they can at least, have a duty to evaluate it for the board.
I have no issues with the changes that are made. I
No,
just want
nor
to make
do I.
sure that we're not confused about how we go through process.
Bless you.
Maybe one thing that can help is to understand really the context of this. An email came to us June 21st with this information telling us it must be adopted by September 1. So in order for that to happen, this is the only board meeting that you would have had in order to meet the county's September 1 deadline.
Yeah, and that's the thing with it. When you have a standing committee, it should be easy to, contact the superintendent, whoever the chair of the committee is, and just follow that protocol, but we'll clean that up. So yeah, I don't have a problem, but it's a good question.
Good suggestions. Yeah, this, I would say, is definitely a one-off and doesn't disrupt our notion of having the Board Policy Review Committee tackle, the batches of policies that will land on your desk with appreciation. Okay, so are we okay with consent on this item as well, everyone? All right, so good. That wraps up our action discussion items, moves us to
Do I need an action tonight, though, to make the September? deadline?
No, I think they got pushed
Deadline.
back from boards, and there's
Oh,
a,
okay.
yeah, there's a November 30th. But they're suggesting, as you saw, that it will take them 30 days to review ours before we re-agendize it. So there's a little cushion. So this is good. We'll have plenty of time. Okay, good questions, good comments, good discussions. We're on to board member reports, correspondence, board operations, and recognition. Want to start with Mr. Tom?
First of all, as I say, I'm very excited that we're going to finish our first meeting before 10 p.m. and not have to vote to extend the meeting.
Yeah. Yay.
All right, so that's good. So,
All right, so moving along.
Last week, Ms. Emberling and I were at the City School Liaison Committee, and we had a Safe Routes to School presentation. 2 points I'll make out of that is that the city with the committee did complete the walk and roll maps for all 17 of our schools, and they have them posted on the city website. They are working with our schools to get them posted on their websites. Perhaps it might be something to even have available from our district website for all schools. But they, in particular, were working with the secondary schools to get them to post them, and I think they've gotten them for those. I forget which school they did cite one of them that seemed to be the model. I think it was Gunn, but I can't remember. The other one was that the police officer did report that they have restored the traffic team officers that were eliminated before, but they've been restored but at a reduced level from what they were prior to any of their cuts. Oh, and then the only other thing I'll note is that I will be missing our next school board meeting, so I'm glad we got some good things on consent that I agree with.
You could always call in.
From India, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're going to put a little sign outside
Yeah.
your hotel room
Right.
that you're having a meeting there.
Thank you, Mr. Tom, and have a safe and exciting trip. Ms. Townsend?
Yes, with BPRC, Kathleen was great. She tried to get all our schedules. We're trying to regularize our meetings so we can anticipate them, and hopefully what we can do in the future as well is when we initially had BPRC, we used to get those big blocks of and we would get together and we decide who to send them to as members of the committee. But since it's difficult to, we have one meeting a month, and hopefully we'll get to the concrete part of the board policies. And my recommendation is that the superintendent and whoever's the committee chair sit and look at those quickly and make sure that they're all going to all the right staff members before it comes back to the committee. It's one of those things to, generally they get sent out to the right people, but it's good, again, this is the policy committee, so we want to make sure that at least one member of the board, presumably the chair and the superintendent, will make sure they get out to the right staff before they come back to the actual agendized meetings. So again, trying to regularize this process. I think we're getting there. We'll get there. If you have any thoughts about that, you can let Dr. McGee know.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good. Thanks for working with Kathleen on that. I know she really appreciates it.
Yeah, no, it's great to get these dates out there.
Ms. Emberlin?
Okay. Also, the City Schools Liaison meeting sent the City of Palo Alto pins to everybody.
Oh, lovely.
Hey. So
Oh, wow.
pass those down.
Thank
You have
you.
one, right? Okay. So, yeah, this is from their Our Palo Alto talks that they've been doing. And they're gearing up to complete their housing element for their comp plan, and are talking with us about, they're very interested to hear our enrollment report, as I'm sure are all of us.
We're all interested,
And in conjunction with the anticipated housing boom that is coming and continues to come, they quoted the county plan. What was that plan called? It's like a 20-year prediction of moving from the 60-some thousand that we have now in Palo Alto to nearly 80 to 85,000. So they were saying from the 70s till about the 2000s, there were about 45,000 people in Palo Alto, and then just in the last 10 years, it's gone up to 65, just within that short amount of time. And now they're predicting that again. So just in thinking of our plan in terms of enrollment, they're thinking about all these big topics in terms of their housing element, on which I'm serving on that committee as the school board liaison.
Yeah, you really like that, don't you?
And then,
Can I add one thing?
yeah, yeah.
I paved the way for you. What are you talking about?
What I found very interesting was I never thought about any kind of correlation between city population and student enrollment. And it seems uncorrelated, which was surprising to me, because when they talked about it, the population of Palo Alto was flat or declining, and then it's increased recently. But throughout all of that, we've had relatively steady student enrollment increase. And so that, I just thought that was very surprising to me.
It is interesting.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, the demographics have changed in terms of, who in the population is living in Palo Alto.
Yeah.
And we'll have our enrollment, I think it's the 14th day, so we've been really monitoring that day by day. But I will say about our Palo Alto, I put Jan on the 620, well, I actually went with her on the 6:23 a.m. train to go north of the airport, and a lot more people got off than got on the train. I was amazed at just the crowd. And I asked, I had lunch on Monday with Jim, and I said, I wouldn't believe this, but what he said the population rises to during the day, and talk about this, our Palo Alto conversation is really an important one, I think. And how to, I don't know how that impacts the demographics, but it does seem more crowded and more congested. And
Some would say more vibrant, but I suppose that would be a political statement.
yeah. Well, there's just more people. I mean, and as I said, is this just a time of day thing? He said, no, it's. He says we're really getting a handle on how many people come in versus how many commuters go out, and it's growing that way too. I mean, not just in residents, but in the people that work in this community. Yeah.
Well, that is some of what the city's comprehensive plan and dealing with ABAG that they've been trying to work on for a while. So, do you have more? Okay. I thought it was fabulous that you've published your second cup of coffee schedule, and I wanted to know whether you would like to have board members with you, whether you'd prefer to just go and hear.
I'd love to have you with you, of course. Yeah. No, well, in all seriousness, I think it's important to have that, and I think it's good for the community to see. I appreciate the second set of ears along with a second cup of coffee.
So I was going to suggest, and it probably wouldn't work perfectly, but we all have schools that we're assigned to, and if we could try to make it to the school that we're assigned to, and if we can't, to let the other members know so that somebody else can go take their place. Because if 5 of us come to 1 cup of coffee, that's not really helpful. Right. But if you'd like to have one of us at each.
It'd be great, and there's some in the evening. I mean, I think there's at least a couple in the evening.
Okay.
So, no, that'd be great.
Okay.
I mean, it was really nice to have you at this event last Saturday, and I think it's important. It adds a lot to it. It's good for the community to see us together.
So I've been going to Pass's ice cream event every year since I've been on the board, except last year when they didn't have it, through their numerous different names. And, you all know this. Sometimes just being there, it's not what you say, it's just being there is really important. And hearing what people say is more important than what we say. So I think that was really helpful. With that in mind, I went to the 2 high schools the first day of high school. Then I went to 9 schools the next day because I wanted to make sure that every school had seen a board member or a member of the leadership staff. And that's a big deal too. And so it just for us to keep in mind. That doesn't mean that all 5 of us go to something. I think we have to spread the wealth. I also wanted to share with you that Dr. McGee's been invited to, maybe he would tell you, been invited to speak
That's right.
about the future of education, along with Michael Kirst and a few other educators, and actually one of our teachers, Elizabeth Fee, by the Dartmouth Club, and they've opened up the event to anyone in the community who's interested in going.
Where?
September 30th.
September 30th.
Very funny.
Yeah, and there may be a similarity between the people I just mentioned in Dartmouth, but anyways, September 30th at 6 to 9, and the event right now is at one place, but it may be moved, so I'm not going to say where it is. We will send something. We'll have the
Okay.
PTA send something out.
All right, good, thank you.
Nice, good. I think I would like to recognize 3 people. Actually, one is a very large group. I'd like to, we were all celebrating ribbon cuttings last week at 2 sites, and I think probably represented about another 150,000 square feet between the new buildings open to students, the 2 new buildings at Pally and the new classroom buildings at Duveneck. And just wanted to take the opportunity at our public meeting to thank our residents for approving the bond measure in 2008, and the continuing excellent facilities that it's providing for our students. They are just terrific. So thank you to our residents and voters. And in a parallel sense, I wanted to just extend on behalf of the whole board our appreciation to Dr. Galton, who was also in attendance at these ribbon cuttings as well as those last year. I mean, we're starting to see, I think it's now 400,000 square feet. More than half of the program's facilities are now available to students, and they are just remarkable. And it takes so much work that we don't see, because Dr. Galton has been such an effective owner agent, is what I think we decided to call him a while back. And there are so many details. He's just a master of staying on top of those details, and seeing problems before they even surface. And we all really, really appreciate his work. So wherever you are, Dr. Galton, are you back there? Oh, there you are, back there. Yes.
Still hanging in there.
Yes, thank you, Bob. My last thanks goes to Jaime Rodriguez with the city. You guys are mentioning city school liaison, who also related to facilities, and Dr. Galton. Not only was a terrific support and resource for the school district last week during the pre-opening and opening days at Pally, with that Pally Embarcadero intersection, if you will, and the multiple roles that location plays for both community members who are entering and exiting town and country, to the work commuters that go up and down Embarcadero, to our parents and students who are getting to and from Pally. And Jaime Rodriguez was there for at least 2 days, and probably more, just lending his expert eye to the patterns. Had several spontaneous fixes, one including just coordinating the sequencing between the 2 light systems, and he also detected quickly with his crew a faulty component, which he replaced before school started. So I'm advised also that he has been a terrific support over the summer in multiple locations with the, we saw some of the wayfinding for the bike paths throughout town, just making intersections and bike paths safer for our residents and our students. So big thanks to Jaime Rodriguez and the city of Palo Alto.
And you wrote some beautiful letters of thanks on behalf
Yes.
for
Oh, my
the
goodness.
board and all of us. You did a great job. Thank you, President Mitchell, but
You are welcome.
acknowledging and answering all those emails and CCing the rest of the board. You've done a phenomenal job, so thank you.
Very
Very
kind.
warm.
Thank you.
Really
Yeah, thank
impressive.
you for accompanying Dr. McGee on all his.
Oh, that's been fun.
Yeah, that was
On his
cool.
big
We're not
tour.
done yet.
No, I know, yeah.
More.
That's been very fun, yeah, the introductions. So I think without further ado, unless anyone, do you have any
No, just
parting-
back to school nights are hopping, and it's been exciting to see those, and the board members are welcome to attend those, and the teachers really do a nice job with these. So I just wanted to close, kind of bring this back to students and staff, and just they're so excited about the kids, and it's just vibrant. It's just, I can't think of a better word, and so fulfilling, and such a great beginning to the year with these organized back to school nights. So.
Hear, hear. And nice first day.
How about it? Thank you.
It is, yeah. All right, let's wrap it up.
Yay.
I know, yeah, look.